The glass didn't shatter. It should have. Vivian Hale's fist connected with the window of her corner office on the 43rd floor, knuckles white against the storm-dark sky, and Miles Carter froze in the hallway with his laptop bag halfway to his shoulder. He'd never seen her cry. Hell, he'd never seen her blink too long. But there she was, Boston's most untouchable CEO, the woman who'd fired 3 VPs in one breath last quarter, folded over her desk, shoulders shaking like the city below. The blizzard had swallowed the streets 2 hours ago, trapping them both in a building that was supposed to be empty. Miles took one step back, the floor creaked, her head snapped up. Their eyes met through frosted glass. And before he could run, she opened the door and whispered 2 words that rewrote everything. Help me. If you want to see how far this story can reach, drop a comment with your city below and smash that like button. Now let's get into it. The nor'easter hit Boston like a freight train made of ice and rage. Miles Carter had seen the weather alerts on his phone since noon, screaming red banners that warned everyone to get home, get safe, get gone. But data analytics didn't stop for weather. The quarterly reports were due Monday, and Miles had 3 models left to validate before he could even think about leaving. So he stayed. He always stayed. That's what single dads with mortgages and daughter-shaped responsibilities did. They stayed until the work was done. By 6:30, the office was a graveyard. Desks sat abandoned, coffee mugs still half full, coats forgotten on chairs. The fluorescent lights hummed alone. Outside, the wind screamed against the glass like it wanted in. Snow came down in sheets so thick Miles couldn't see the building across the street. He could barely see the street. He saved his last file, shut his laptop, and slung his bag over his shoulder. His daughter, Emma, was safe, already at her best friend's house for a sleepover, probably building a pillow fort and eating pizza rolls without a care in the world. He'd texted her an hour ago. She'd sent back a blurry selfie with her friend, both of them grinning like maniacs. The knot in his chest had loosened just enough to breathe. Now he just had to get home. Miles walked through the empty halls, his footsteps echoing too loud. The building felt wrong when it was this quiet, like a stage after the actors had left, all the warmth drained out. He passed the break room, the copy center, the glass-walled conference rooms where he'd sat through 1,000 meetings that could have been emails. Everything looked smaller without people in it. Lonelier. He was halfway to the elevator when he saw the light. Corner office, 43rd floor, executive suite, Vivian Hale's office. Miles stopped. His brain did the math in half a second. She was still here. Of course she was still here. Vivian Hale didn't leave early. She didn't leave on time. She probably had a cot hidden behind her desk and a mini-fridge stocked with sparkling water and intimidation. The woman was a machine, brilliant, brutal, unstoppable. She'd taken over as CEO 3 years ago and turned the company from bleeding revenue to breaking records. She didn't smile. She didn't small talk. She didn't do anything that wasn't mission critical. And right now, she was crying. Miles saw it through the frosted glass, her silhouette bent over the desk, head in her hands, shoulders trembling. For a second, he thought he'd imagined it. Vivian Hale didn't cry. She didn't even flinch when the CFO had a meltdown in the boardroom last month. But there it was, undeniable and impossible. She was breaking. He should leave, he knew that. This wasn't his business. This was the kind of moment that ended careers if you got too close, the kind of vulnerability powerful people buried deep and punished anyone who witnessed. He adjusted his bag, took a step toward the elevator. The floor creaked, her head shot up. Their eyes locked through the glass. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Miles felt his stomach drop. She looked wrecked, her perfect composure shattered. Mascara smudged under her eyes, face pale, expression raw in a way that felt like seeing someone without their skin. She stared at him like he'd caught her committing a crime. Then she stood, crossed the office in 4 strides, and opened the door. "Help me." Her voice cracked on the words. Miles blinked. What? "I need your help." She said it again, steadier this time, but her hands were shaking. "Please." He'd worked here for 6 years. He'd presented to her twice, passed her in the hallway maybe 30 times, sat 3 rows behind her at the annual shareholder meeting. She'd never said his name. She'd definitely never said please. "Ms. Hale, are you okay?" "No." She laughed, sharp and bitter. No, I'm not okay, but I need you to do something for me anyway. Miles glanced toward the elevator. The storm howled against the windows. He thought about Emma, safe and warm, and probably not even thinking about him. He thought about his tiny apartment in Somerville, the frozen dinner waiting in his freezer, the silence that would greet him when he got home. He thought about walking away from whatever this was. He didn't. What do you need? Vivian exhaled, slow and shaky, like she'd been holding her breath for hours. She stepped back, gestured into her office. Come in, please. Miles hesitated, then he followed her inside. The office was exactly what he'd imagined. Sleek, expensive, controlled. Floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, or would have if the city hadn't disappeared under a blanket of white. A massive desk made of dark wood and sharp angles. Bookshelves lined with business theory and nothing personal. No photos, no plants. Nothing that suggested a human being actually worked here, except the tissue box on the desk, and the crumpled tissues scattered around it. Vivian closed the door behind him, leaned against it for a second like she needed the support. When she looked at him again, her face was a mask trying to reassemble itself. I have a wedding to attend tonight, she said. Miles stared. In this? Yes. The roads are, I know. She moved to the window, arms crossed, staring out at the storm. It's my brother's wedding, at the Langham, downtown. The ceremony's at 8. Ms. Hale, I don't think, I need a date. The words dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Miles felt the ripples, didn't understand them. Date. Yes. You want me to pretend to be my boyfriend? She turned to face him, and her expression was steel and desperation in equal measure. For one night, just tonight. I'll pay you. Name a number. Miles's brain short-circuited. I'm sorry, what? Vivian crossed the room, sat on the edge of her desk like she was negotiating a merger. My family thinks I'm broken. They think I'm married to this job, incapable of connection, too damaged to let anyone in. My mother has spent the last year introducing me to every eligible bachelor in her social circle, like I'm a project that needs fixing. My ex-fiancé is going to be at this wedding, and he's going to look at me like I proved him right by showing up alone. And Her voice cracked again. She stopped, pressed her fingers to her temples. I can't do it, she whispered. I can't walk in there alone and have them all look at me like I'm less. Miles didn't know what to say. This woman, this untouchable, terrifying woman, was unraveling in front of him, and he had no idea how to handle it. He thought about all the rumors he'd heard in the break room, that she slept 4 hours a night, that she ate lunch at her desk every day, that she'd never taken a vacation in 3 years. He thought about the way people talked about her, respect laced with fear, admiration mixed with pity. He thought about the way she'd said, "Help me," like it was the hardest sentence she'd ever spoken. Why me? He asked quietly. Vivian looked at him, really looked at him, and something flickered in her eyes. Calculation, maybe, or recognition? Because you're real, she said. You have a daughter. I've seen the photo on your desk. You wear the same 3 ties in rotation. You bring lunch from home. You're not polished. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're just, she gestured vaguely, normal. And that's exactly what I need. It should have felt like an insult. Somehow it didn't. I have a daughter, Miles said slowly. I can't just... She's at a sleepover. I checked the office directory. Your emergency contact is listed as Rebecca Chen. Your daughter's at her house tonight. Vivian's voice was calm now, clinical, back in control. I'm not asking you to abandon her. I'm asking you for 3 hours, 4, tops. I'll have a car take you home afterward, and I'll pay you $10,000. Miles choked. 10, 20. Ms. Hale, 30, final offer. The number hung in the air between them. $30,000. That was Emma's summer camp for the next 3 years. That was the new water heater he'd been putting off. That was breathing room in a life that never gave him any. You're serious, he said. Completely. Miles ran a hand through his hair. This was insane. This was absolutely insane. He should walk out right now, go home, pretend this conversation never happened. What would I have to do? Vivian straightened, and just like that, the CEO was back. Stand next to me. Smile. Answer questions about how we met. Let them believe we're together. That's it. And if they ask specifics, I'll handle it. She moved to her desk, pulled out a folder, because of course she had a folder, and handed it to him. This is everything you need to know. Our story, how long we've been dating, key details about my family. Study it in the car. Miles opened the folder. Inside was a printed document, neatly organized, with bullet points and timelines. How we met. 3 months ago. Charity gala, shared table, conversation about data ethics. It read like a script, like she'd been planning this for weeks. You've thought about this, he said. I think about everything. And if I say no? Vivian's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes went dark. Then I go alone. And I survive it. I always do. The way she said it, flat, resigned, like survival was the best she could hope for, made Miles's chest ache. He thought about Emma, about the way she'd asked him last month if he was sad because of her, if Mommy dying was somehow her fault. He thought about how he'd held her and promised he was okay, that they were both okay, that they'd figure it out together. He thought about how hard it was to let people in after loss, to trust that anything good could last. He thought about Vivian Hale, alone in her office, crying where no one could see. Okay, he said. Vivian blinked. Okay? I'll do it. Relief washed over her face so fast she couldn't hide it. Thank you. But I need to call Emma first. Let her know I might be late. Of course. Miles pulled out his phone, stepped toward the window. The city was gone, just white and wind and darkness. He texted Emma instead of calling, didn't want to wake her if she'd already crashed. Hey kiddo, storm's bad. Might be late getting home. You good? The reply came 30 seconds later. I'm good. Having fun. Stay safe, Dad. He smiled despite everything, pocketed his phone, turned back to Vivian. What now? Now, Vivian said, crossing to her desk and picking up her phone. I make a call. You're going to need a suit. The suit arrived at Miles's apartment 45 minutes later. He'd barely made it home. The streets were a nightmare. Snow piled so high the cab had to take 3 detours. And he was still shaking snow off his coat when the doorbell rang. A delivery man stood there with a garment bag and a polite smile, like delivering custom suits in a blizzard was a normal Tuesday. Mr. Carter? Yeah. From Mrs. Hale. Good evening, sir. The man handed over the bag and disappeared before Miles could tip him. Inside the bag was a suit that probably cost more than his rent. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a crisp white shirt and a navy tie that looked like it had been chosen by someone who understood color theory at a molecular level. There was even a pair of shoes, sleek and expensive, exactly his size. Miles stared at the suit, then at his reflection in the hallway mirror, his worn jeans, his fraying sweater, the bags under his eyes that had become permanent fixtures. He looked like a man who'd been running on fumes for 2 years. He looked like someone who didn't belong at a luxury hotel wedding pretending to date a CEO. He put on the suit anyway. It fit like it had been made for him. Probably had been. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Car is waiting outside. V.H. Miles grabbed his coat, his cheap practical winter coat that absolutely did not match the suit, and headed downstairs. The car was a sleek black sedan that looked like it had been polished that morning. The driver nodded at him, opened the door. Miles slid inside and found Vivian already there, staring at her phone with the kind of focus most people reserved for defusing bombs. She looked up when he sat down. Her eyes widened, just a fraction. You clean up well, she said. You sound surprised. I am a little. She was wearing a dress that probably had a name, something elegant and devastating in deep emerald that made her look like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Her hair was pulled back, sleek and controlled. Her makeup had been redone. Flawless, like the crying had never happened. But Miles could still see it in her eyes, the cracks under the polish. You okay? He asked quietly. I'm fine. Vivian, I'm fine. She said it harder this time, like she could make it true through sheer force of will. Then she handed him the folder. Read. Miles read. The document was thorough. Terrifyingly thorough. It outlined their entire fake relationship. They'd met at a charity gala 3 months ago, bonded over a conversation about ethical data use and the implications of AI in corporate decision-making. They'd gone to dinner twice before Vivian had asked him out properly. They'd been dating for 2.5 months. Miles's daughter knew and liked her. Vivian had been to his apartment once. They hadn't discussed moving in together, but they were serious. "You wrote this when?" Miles asked. Last week. Last week. I knew the wedding was coming. I knew I'd need a solution. And you chose me because... Vivian looked at him, and for a moment the mask slipped again. Because you're kind. I've seen the way you talk to people in the office, the receptionists, the junior analysts, the cleaning staff. You remember their names. You ask about their lives. You're decent. And I needed someone decent. Miles didn't know what to say to that. The car pulled up to the Langham, and the world outside turned into something out of a snow globe. The hotel glowed against the storm, warm and golden and impossibly beautiful. Valets in long coats rushed to open doors, ushering guests inside. Through the glass, Miles could see the lobby. Chandeliers and marble and people dressed like they'd stepped out of a different tax bracket. "Ready?" Vivian asked. "No." "Good. Neither am I." She took his hand. Her skin was cold and her grip was tight, tight enough that Miles realized this wasn't just an act for her. She was terrified. This woman who fired executives without blinking, who ran a multi-million-dollar company like a general commanding troops, was terrified of walking into her own brother's wedding. Miles squeezed her hand back. "We've got this," he said, even though he had no idea if that was true. Vivian nodded. "Let's go." The lobby was a war zone disguised as elegance. People in tuxedos and gowns milled around with champagne flutes, their laughter too loud, their smiles too sharp. Miles felt every eye turn toward them the second they walked in, felt the weight of their stares like physical things. Vivian's hand tightened on his. "Vivian!" A woman's voice cut through the noise, bright and brittle. A woman in her 60s swept toward them, tall and thin, and perfectly put together in a way that suggested personal stylists and expensive genetics. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mother," Vivian said, and her voice went flat. "You made it. I wasn't sure you would." The woman's gaze slid to Miles, sharp and assessing. "And you brought someone." "This is Miles Carter," Vivian said smoothly. "Miles, this is my mother, Catherine Hale." Miles extended his hand. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Hale." Catherine's handshake was brief and cold. "Carter. Unusual name. What do you do, Mr. Carter?" "I'm a data analyst. I work at my company," Vivian cut in. "We met at a charity event." "How convenient." Catherine's smile sharpened. "And how long has this been going on?" 2.5 months. "Interesting. You didn't mention it." "I'm mentioning it now." The air between them could have cut glass. Miles stood there feeling like he'd walked into the middle of a chess game where he didn't know the rules and all the pieces were knives. "Well," Catherine said, her tone suggesting she'd found them both wanting and would discuss it later. "The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. Do try not to be late, darling." She swept away, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and disapproval. Vivian exhaled slowly. "That went well." "Does she always?" "Yes." Miles wanted to ask more, but a hand clapped him on the shoulder, and he turned to find a man about Vivian's age, grinning like they were old friends. He had Vivian's sharp cheekbones and dark hair, but where she was all controlled edges, he radiated warmth. "You must be the mysterious Miles," the man said. "I'm Daniel, the groom, also Vivian's favorite brother." "Only brother," Vivian corrected, but there was affection in her voice now, real and unguarded. "Exactly. Which makes me the favorite by default." Daniel turned to Miles, his grin widening. "So you're the guy who convinced my sister that human connection isn't a sign of weakness. Impressive." "Achta." "Don't answer that. She'll analyze it." Daniel leaned in conspiratorially. "Word of advice, if she starts talking about emotional labor as a resource allocation problem, just smile and nod. Trust me." Vivian rolled her eyes, but Miles saw the corner of her mouth twitch. "Shouldn't you be with your bride?" "Probably, but I wanted to meet the man brave enough to date you." Daniel's expression turned sincere. Seriously, though, it's good to see you here with someone. You look happy. Vivian's mask cracked just for a second. Thanks, Danny. Now go find your seats before Mother has an aneurysm. She's already mad I insisted on a chocolate fountain. He winked at Miles. Welcome to the family, man. It's a nightmare, but the champagne's great. He disappeared into the crowd, and Vivian let out a breath that sounded like relief. He's nice, Miles said. He's the only one who is. They made their way toward the ballroom, and Miles felt the stares again, curious, calculating, cold. He heard whispers that weren't quite whispers. That's Vivian Hale. Who's that with her? I heard she doesn't date. Probably an escort. Vivian's jaw tightened, but she didn't react. Miles moved closer, let his shoulder brush hers. A silent message. I'm here. The ballroom was stunning. Ice sculptures and white roses and lights strung like stars. A string quartet played something soft and beautiful in the corner. Rows of chairs faced an altar made of winter branches and candlelight. It should have been magical. Instead, it felt like a performance. They found their seats. Third row, right side. Vivian sat down with the posture of someone preparing for battle. Miles sat next to her, hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. Around them, people settled into their seats, still whispering, still staring. And then, from behind them, a voice Miles didn't recognize but immediately hated. Vivian, what a surprise! Vivian went rigid. Miles turned and saw a man in a perfectly tailored tux, tall and handsome in the way that suggested expensive gyms and better genetics. His smile was easy, confident, and absolutely full of knives. Grant, Vivian said, her voice arctic. I didn't think you'd come. Grant's eyes slid to Miles, assessing and dismissive in one glance. And with a date, no less. Wonders never cease. Miles felt Vivian's hand find his under the armrest, her fingers lacing through his, holding on like he was a lifeline. Grant Wexler, the man said, extending his hand to Miles with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Old friend of the family. Miles Carter. Miles shook his hand, resisted the urge to squeeze too hard. Carter, data analyst, right? I heard. Grant's tone made it sound like he was saying janitor. Fascinating field, so grounded. It pays the bills, Miles said evenly. I'm sure it does. Grant turned back to Vivian. We should catch up later, Viv. It's been too long. I'm busy. Of course you are. You're always busy. His smile turned pitying. Some things never change. He walked away, and Vivian's hand was shaking in Miles's. Breathe, Miles whispered. I'm fine. Vivian, I said I'm fine. But she wasn't. Miles could see it in the tension in her shoulders, the way her breathing had gone shallow and tight. She was holding herself together by sheer force of will, and the night had barely started. The lights dimmed. The music swelled. The ceremony began. Miles sat there holding Vivian's hand in the dark, surrounded by strangers and judgment and winter light, and realized he had no idea what he'd just walked into. But he wasn't letting go. Not yet. The ceremony was beautiful in the way expensive things always are. Flawless, choreographed, empty of anything messy or real. Daniel stood at the altar looking genuinely happy, his bride radiant beside him, and the officiant spoke about love and commitment with the polish of someone who'd done this 300 times. Miles watched it all through a fog of hyper-awareness, feeling Vivian's hand trembling in his, feeling the weight of Grant's stare from 2 rows back, feeling the cold assessment of Catherine Hale's eyes from across the aisle. When the couple kissed, the room erupted in polite applause. Vivian's hand finally relaxed. Worst part's over, Miles whispered. That wasn't the worst part, Vivian whispered back. The reception hall was somehow even more intimidating than the ceremony space. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings like frozen waterfalls. Tables were draped in white silk, centerpieces made of orchids and candlelight. A jazz quartet played something smooth and sophisticated in the corner, while waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably had French names Miles couldn't pronounce. Their assigned table was near the front, close enough to the head table that Miles knew it was a power move. Catherine had placed them where everyone could see, where Vivian would be on display. The other seats were occupied by people who looked like they summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen, old money, new money, The kind of money that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. Vivian, darling. A woman in her 40s with sharp features and sharper jewelry materialized beside them. I heard you were bringing someone. How exciting. Hello, Margaret. Vivian's voice had gone into corporate mode, smooth and impenetrable. You must introduce me. Miles Carter, this is Margaret Ashford. She sits on the board of the Metropolitan Opera. Margaret's handshake was limp and performative. A data analyst. How wonderfully practical. It has its moments, Miles said. And you have a daughter, I'm told. How old? 8. Precious age. Does she live with you? Yes. Full-time? How modern? Margaret's smile suggested she found nothing modern about it. And what does your ex-wife think of your relationship with Vivian? The question was a trap, laid out like a bear snare. Miles felt Vivian tense beside him. My wife passed away 2 years ago, Miles said evenly. The table went silent. Margaret's expression flickered, genuine surprise, then calculation. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Thank you. That must have been very difficult. For both of you. Your daughter especially. We manage. I'm sure you do. Margaret turned to Vivian. How wonderful that you found each other. After such loss, I mean. You both understand what it's like to be alone. It was phrased like sympathy, but landed like an accusation. Miles watched Vivian's jaw tighten, watched her reach for her water glass with a hand that shook just slightly. We're not alone anymore, Vivian said quietly. No, I suppose you're not. Margaret's gaze swept over Miles one more time, finding him wanting in ways she didn't bother to hide. Well, enjoy the evening. She drifted away and Vivian drained half her water in one swallow. I'm sorry, she said under her breath. For what? For subjecting you to this. To them. I knew what I was signing up for. Did you? She looked at him, and her eyes were dark with something that looked like shame. Because I'm starting to think I didn't. Before Miles could respond, Daniel appeared at the microphone on the small stage, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, and let's be honest, if you're here, you know me. I'm Daniel Hale, the luckiest man alive. He reached for his bride's hand, pulled her close. I'm not going to bore you with a long speech, but I do want to say something about love. The room settled. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. I used to think love was about finding someone perfect, Daniel continued. Someone who fit all the boxes, checked all the requirements. My family is very good at requirements. A ripple of knowing laughter. Catherine's expression didn't change. But then I met Sophie, and she didn't fit any of my boxes. She was messy and stubborn, and she laughed too loud, and she cried during car commercials. And I realized that's what makes it real. The imperfect parts. The parts that don't make sense on paper but make sense in your chest. Miles felt Vivian go very still beside him. So if there's anyone here tonight who's been trying to fit themselves into boxes that don't feel right, trying to be perfect instead of happy. Daniel's eyes found Vivian's across the room. Stop. Life's too short. Love's too important. And you deserve to be messy. He raised his glass. To being messy. To being messy, the room echoed, and everyone drank. With military precision, seared scallops. With military precision, seared scallops. Truffle risotto. Filet mignon that melted on contact. Miles ate mechanically, hyper-aware of every fork placement, every napkin fold, every micro-expression on the faces around him. Conversation flowed like a carefully managed river, touching on safe topics. The weather, the stock market, upcoming charity galas, and avoiding anything that might require actual honesty. So Miles, said the man to his left, a silver-haired executive type named Richard, who'd introduced himself as a family friend. Vivian tells me you work in data analytics. What's your specialty? Predictive modeling, mostly. Consumer behavior, market trends. Fascinating. And you do this for Vivian's company? I do. Must be interesting working together, mixing business and pleasure. Richard's tone suggested he found it neither interesting nor appropriate. We keep it professional at the office, Vivian cut in smoothly. I'm sure you do. Richard smiled. Though I imagine it's difficult maintaining those boundaries. Especially in your position, Vivian. People talk. People always talk, Vivian said. True enough, though usually they have less ammunition. Richard turned back to Miles. And your daughter, Emily, is it? Emma. Emma. Does she understand the nature of your relationship with Vivian? Children can be so perceptive. Miles felt his temper start to rise. She understands that Vivian makes me happy. How sweet. And does Vivian spend much time with Emma? It was Vivian who answered, her voice cool and precise. We had breakfast together last Sunday. Emma made pancakes. Vivian brought strawberries. We watched cartoons. The lie came out so smoothly, Miles almost believed it himself. He glanced at her, saw the slight tension around her eyes, and realized she'd memorized this too. Had built a whole false history complete with breakfast foods and fruit. Lovely, Richard said in a tone that meant anything but. The conversation moved on, circling through business mergers and vacation homes and people Miles had never heard of. He nodded in the right places, smiled when expected, and felt more exhausted than he had after any 14-hour workday. Across the table, Vivian handled it all with the ease of someone who'd been doing this her entire life. Parrying questions, deflecting criticism, maintaining perfect posture and perfect composure even as the walls closed in. When dinner finally ended and the music shifted to something livelier, couples began moving toward the dance floor. Daniel and his bride led the way, spinning and laughing like they were the only people in the room. Others followed, Catherine with some distinguished-looking man, Margaret with her husband, the whole elegant machine of the evening sliding into its next phase. We should dance, Vivian said quietly. I'm not much of a dancer. Neither am I, but they're watching. She was right. Miles could feel the eyes on them, waiting to see if the performance would continue, if this relationship was real enough to survive a slow dance. He stood, offered his hand. Then let's give them a show. They moved to the edge of the dance floor, and Miles pulled Vivian into a standard dance hold, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers, maintaining the proper distance. She fit against him like she'd been measured for it, her hand light on his shoulder, her posture perfect. You do know how to dance, she said. My wife taught me. Before Emma was born, we took lessons. The memory came with the usual ache, but softer than it used to be. She said every man should know how to waltz. She was right. They moved together, and Miles was surprised by how natural it felt, how easily Vivian followed his lead, how the rhythm settled into his bones like muscle memory. Around them, other couples swayed and turned, but Miles barely saw them. He was too focused on the woman in his arms, on the way her mask kept slipping and reforming, slipping and reforming. You're good at this, he said. At dancing? At pretending everything's fine. Vivian's expression didn't change, but her hand tightened on his shoulder. I've had practice. How long have you been doing it? Performing for them? My entire life. The answer was so matter-of-fact it hurt. Vivian, don't. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please don't be kind to me right now. I can handle their cruelty, but your kindness is going to break me. Miles didn't know what to say to that, so he just held her closer, let the music wash over them, and tried to ignore the fact that this moment, this false moment, this purchased moment, felt more real than anything had in a long time. When the song ended, they pulled apart to polite applause. Vivian's mask was back in place, perfect and impenetrable. She was about to say something when Grant appeared beside them, smooth as oil. Mind if I cut in? Yes, Miles said immediately. It's fine, Vivian said, her voice tight. Vivian, it's fine. She looked at Miles with eyes that begged him to trust her. I'll just be a minute. Miles stepped back, every instinct screaming at him to stay, to not let this man anywhere near her. But this wasn't his call to make. This was Vivian's life, Vivian's past, Vivian's battle. He moved to the edge of the dance floor and watched Grant pull Vivian into a hold that was too familiar, too possessive. Watched them begin to move, Grant leaning in to say something that made Vivian's spine go rigid. That's her ex-fiancé. Miles turned to find Daniel beside him, two champagne flutes in hand. He offered one to Miles. I figured, Miles said, accepting the glass. He's also a complete jackass. I figured that too. Daniel took a long sip, his eyes on the dance floor. They were engaged for 8 months, 3 years ago. Everyone thought it was perfect, perfect couple, perfect match, perfect merger of families and fortunes. What happened? Vivian ended it 2 weeks before the wedding, returned the ring, canceled the venue, didn't give anyone an explanation. Daniel's expression was thoughtful. My mother was furious. Grant was devastated, or at least he acted like it. And Vivian? Vivian went back to work like nothing had happened, put in 18-hour days for 6 months straight, bought a penthouse, promoted to CEO a year later. Daniel paused. She never told me why she ended it. She doesn't talk about it. Doesn't talk about much of anything personal, really. Miles watched Vivian and Grant move across the floor, watched the tension in her shoulders, the careful distance she maintained even as Grant tried to pull her closer. She's terrified, Miles said quietly. Of Grant? Of being seen as broken. Daniel looked at him with new interest. You figured that out fast. She told me. Earlier. Miles took a drink, the champagne sharp on his tongue. She said your mother thinks she's damaged, that she can't let anyone in. My mother thinks everyone is damaged if they don't fit her very narrow definition of acceptable. Daniel's voice held an edge now. Vivian's biggest sin isn't being cold. It's being successful on her own terms. Mother can't control that, can't fix it. So she's decided it's a problem. That's messed up. That's family. Daniel clinked his glass against Miles's. For what it's worth, I like you. You look at her like she's a person, not a project. That's rare. She is a person. Try telling that to everyone else in this room. On the dance floor, the song ended. Grant said something that made Vivian's expression go ice cold. She pulled away, started walking back toward Miles, and Grant caught her wrist. Miles moved without thinking. He crossed the dance floor in 6 strides, every eye turning to watch, and stepped between them. Problem? Miles asked, his voice level but his body language clear. Grant's smile didn't waver. Just catching up with an old friend. She's done catching up. I think Vivian can speak for herself. Then let go of her wrist. For a second, the entire room held its breath. Grant's fingers stayed locked around Vivian's arm, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he released her. Of course. My apologies. He straightened his cuffs, his smile turning sharp. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Vivian. We'll talk later. He walked away, and Vivian stood there looking at Miles like she wasn't sure whether to thank him or be furious. I had it handled, she said. I know. Then why? Because you shouldn't have to handle everything alone. Something cracked in her expression. She turned away quickly, but not before Miles saw the shine in her eyes. I need air, she said. She moved toward the terrace doors, and Miles followed without asking permission. They stepped out into the storm, and the cold hit like a physical wall. Snow was still falling, thick and relentless, covering the terrace in white. The city beyond was barely visible, just shapes and shadows under the onslaught. Vivian walked to the railing, gripped it hard enough her knuckles went white. Miles stood beside her, silent, waiting. He told me I'd never find anyone, she said finally, her voice nearly lost in the wind. Grant, when I ended the engagement, he said I was incapable of real connection, that I'd chosen my career over love, over life, and I'd spend the rest of my existence proving him right by being alone. He's wrong. Is he? She turned to face him, and her composure was completely gone now. Look at me, Miles. I hired you to pretend to be my boyfriend because I couldn't face showing up here alone. I memorized a script for how we met. I bought you a suit. I'm paying you $30,000 to stand next to me and smile so my mother will stop looking at me like I'm defective. You're not defective. Then what am I? The question was raw, desperate. Because I don't know anymore. I don't know how to be anything except in control. I don't know how to let anyone see the mess underneath. I don't even know what the mess looks like because I've spent so long building walls around it that I can't find the door. Miles stepped closer. You want to know what I see? What? Someone who's been holding everything together for so long, she's forgotten she's allowed to fall apart. Someone who's terrified that if she lets anyone in, they'll leave or die. Or realize she's human and decide that's not good enough. Vivian's breath hitched. How did you? Because I've been there. Miles's voice was quiet, steady. After my wife died, I shut down. Completely. I went to work, came home, put Emma to bed, and sat in the dark telling myself I was fine. I was managing. I was handling it. And then one night, Emma asked me if I was sad because of her. If Mommy leaving was her fault. Vivian's eyes widened. Miles. She was 6 years old, and she thought she'd killed her mother because I was too much of a coward to show her that grief was normal. That falling apart didn't mean staying broken. Miles reached out, took Vivian's hand. You're not defective, Vivian. You're scared, and that's okay. That's human. I don't know how to be human around them. She gestured back toward the reception, toward the lights and laughter and judgment. They want perfection. They want control. If I show them anything else, then they'll finally see you. That's what I'm afraid of. The admission hung between them, brutal and honest. Snow settled in Vivian's hair, on her shoulders, melting against her skin. She looked young suddenly, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with weakness and everything to do with truth. I'm so tired, she whispered. I'm so tired of being perfect. Then stop. I don't know how. Miles pulled her closer, wrapped his arms around her, felt her resistance and then her surrender. She collapsed into him, her face pressed against his shoulder, and the sound that came out of her was something between a sob and a scream. He held her while she shook, held her while years of control shattered like ice, held her while the storm raged around them and the party continued inside, oblivious to the woman coming apart in the cold. When she finally pulled back, her makeup was ruined, her perfect mask destroyed. I'm a mess, she said, trying to laugh through the tears. Yeah, you are. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. I know. She looked up at him, and her eyes were clear now, stripped of pretense. Why are you being so nice to me? Because someone should be. That's not a good enough reason. Then because I want to be. Miles reached up, brushed a snowflake from her cheek. Because pretending to be your boyfriend tonight has been more real than anything I've done in 2 years. Because watching you fall apart is the most honest thing I've seen in that entire room. And because... He stopped himself, but Vivian's hand came up to his chest, pressing over his heart. Because what? Miles didn't have an answer that made sense. This was supposed to be an act, a transaction, a few hours of performance for money. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. Like standing on the edge of something terrifying and inevitable. It wasn't supposed to make his chest ache, or his hands shake, or his brain go quiet in ways it hadn't since before loss taught him that nothing good lasted. So he didn't answer with words. He kissed her. It was supposed to be gentle. A soft press of lips, comfort disguised as connection. But the second their mouths met, something ignited. Vivian's hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer. And Miles cupped her face, tilted her head, deepened the kiss into something that felt like falling and flying at the same time. She tasted like champagne and salt and desperation, and he poured everything he couldn't say into the way he held her. All the loneliness and fear and fragile hope that maybe, falling apart together was better than staying perfect alone. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Vivian's eyes were wide with something that looked like terror and wonder in equal measure. That wasn't part of the script, she whispered. I know. We shouldn't... I know. Miles. The terrace door opened and Catherine's voice cut through the moment like a scalpel. Vivian. They sprang apart, but it was too late. Catherine stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable, her gaze sweeping over both of them with the precision of a surgeon identifying disease. We have guests, she said coolly. Perhaps you could save your displays for somewhere more private. Vivian's mask tried to reform, but her hands were still shaking. Mother, Inside, now. Catherine's eyes landed on Miles. You too, Mr. Carter, unless you'd prefer to leave. It was phrased as an option, but delivered as a threat. Miles saw Vivian's expression crumble, saw her reaching for control that wouldn't come, and made a decision. I prefer to stay with Vivian, he said evenly. Catherine's eyebrow arched. How noble. Mother, please, Vivian started, but Catherine had already turned and walked back inside, leaving the door open in clear expectation that they would follow. Vivian pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking. I can't do this. Yes, you can. I can't go back in there. Not like this. Not... Miles took her hands, pulled them away from her face, made her look at him. Yes, you can, because you don't have to do it alone anymore. This isn't real, Miles. We're not... This is all pretend. Does it feel pretend? The question stopped her cold. She stared at him, and Miles saw the exact moment she realized that whatever this had started as, it wasn't that anymore. No, she whispered. Then stop treating it like it is. He took her hand, laced his fingers through hers, and walked back into the reception with her. Every eye turned to watch them enter, took in Vivian's ruined makeup and Miles's protective stance. Whispers rippled through the room like wind through grass. Catherine watched from her position near the head table, her expression glacial. Grant stood near the bar, his smile predatory. And in that moment, Miles understood exactly what Vivian had been so afraid of. Not that people would see her fall apart, but that they'd see her put herself back together and call it weakness. Daniel intercepted them before anyone else could, his expression concerned. You okay? Fine, Vivian said automatically. Viv, I'm fine. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and Miles watched the CEO reassemble herself in real time. I just need to fix my makeup. She pulled away from Miles and headed toward the bathroom, moving with the carefully controlled steps of someone who'd learned to walk through minefields. Daniel watched her go, then turned to Miles. What happened? She broke, Miles said quietly. Finally. And my mother saw. Yeah. That's not good. I'm getting that impression. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Look, I know this is probably way more than you signed up for, but stay close to her, okay? When she's like this, when the walls come down, she tends to do stupid things. Reckless things. Like what? Like disappearing for 3 days after the engagement ended. Like flying to Tokyo on a whim and not telling anyone. Like Daniel stopped himself. Just stay close. Miles nodded, but his attention was on the bathroom door, waiting for Vivian to emerge. When she finally did, 10 minutes later, her makeup had been fixed, her mask rebuilt. She looked perfect again. Untouchable. Unreachable. Exactly the way everyone expected her to look. But Miles saw the cracks now. He knew what was underneath. She crossed to him, took his hand without hesitation, and the room noticed. Grant noticed. Catherine noticed. Margaret and Richard, and every other person who'd spent the evening judging them, noticed. Dance with me again, Vivian said. Gladly. They moved back to the dance floor, and this time when Miles pulled her close, she let him. She rested her head against his chest, right over his heart, and they swayed to music Miles didn't hear. Around them, the party continued, laughter and champagne and the performance of happiness. But in the small circle of their arms, there was only truth. Thank you, Vivian whispered against his shirt. For what? For not running. I wouldn't. You should. This is insane, all of this. Yeah, Miles agreed, it really is. They danced 3 more songs, and with each one Miles felt the shift. The way Vivian's breathing steadied, the way her grip on him relaxed, the way she stopped performing and started just being. Other couples came and went around them, but they stayed, locked in their own small world. Until Grant appeared beside them again. We need to talk, he said to Vivian, ignoring Miles entirely. No, we don't, Vivian said without lifting her head from Miles's chest. It's important. I don't care. Vivian, please. For the first time, Grant's smooth facade cracked, showing something that might have been genuine feeling underneath. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. Vivian pulled back from Miles, looked up at him with an expression that asked permission. Miles wanted to say no, wanted to keep her close and safe from whatever Grant was about to say. But this was her choice, her life. It's up to you, he said quietly. Vivian nodded, then turned to Grant. 5 minutes, and Miles comes with me. Grant's jaw tightened. This is private. Then we don't talk. Fine. The word came out clipped, angry. Fine, both of you. Conference room off the lobby. They followed him through the reception, past curious stares and knowing smiles, into a small conference room that smelled like expensive wood polish and old power. Grant closed the door, leaned against it, and for a long moment just looked at Vivian. You really moved on, he said finally. It's been 3 years, Grant. I know, He ran a hand through his perfect hair, and Miles saw the calculation behind his eyes. The performance of vulnerability. I didn't think you would. Move on, I mean. You said you couldn't. Vivian's spine went rigid. I never said that. You implied it. When you ended things, you said relationships required something you couldn't give. I said I couldn't give it to you. The distinction hit like a slap. Grant's expression hardened. So what's different about him? He gestured at Miles dismissively. What does a data analyst with a kid and a dead wife have that I don't? Miles felt his temper ignite, but Vivian's hand found his, squeezing tight. He doesn't see me as a project, she said quietly. He doesn't treat love like a merger. He doesn't expect perfection. I never expected perfection. You expected a version of me that didn't exist. You wanted the CEO without the mess, the success without the sacrifice. You wanted me to fit into your life without changing anything about yours. That's not true. Then why did you spend 8 months trying to convince me to step down, to take a less demanding role, to prioritize our relationship over my career? Grant's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, Vivian said. You didn't love me, Grant. You loved the idea of me. And when I wouldn't perform that idea perfectly enough, you called me broken. I was hurt. You were right. The admission stopped Grant cold. I was broken. I am broken. But Miles... She looked at Miles, and her eyes were soft now, vulnerable. Miles sees the broken parts and doesn't ask me to fix them. He just stands there and holds me while I figure out how to live with them. Miles's chest went tight. This wasn't the script. This wasn't part of the arrangement. This was real, terrifyingly, impossibly real. Grant stared at them both, and Miles saw the moment he realized he'd lost. Whatever game he'd been playing, whatever outcome he'd expected, this wasn't it. I came here to offer you something, Grant said finally, his voice carefully controlled. A job. Chief Strategy Officer at Zenith Global. Fewer hours, better work-life balance, more time for, he gestured vaguely, personal pursuits. And you thought I'd take it, Vivian said. I thought you might want an escape route, from the pressure, from the expectations. Grant's expression turned pitying. From your mother. It was a smart play, Miles had to admit. Offer Vivian exactly what she seemed to need, positioned as rescue instead of retreat. But Grant had made one fatal miscalculation. He assumed Vivian wanted to escape. No, she said simply. Vivian, I said no, Grant. I'm not leaving my company. I'm not taking an easier path. I'm not running away from pressure or expectations or my mother. Vivian's voice strengthened with each word. I'm done choosing between ambition and love, between success and vulnerability, between being perfect and being human. I'm choosing all of it, the mess and the career, the broken parts and the brilliant parts, the fear and the courage to stand here anyway. That's not sustainable, Grant said. Maybe not. Vivian smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Miles had seen from her all night. But it's honest, and I'm tired of performing. She turned to Miles, took both his hands. I'm ready to go. The reception's not over, Grant protested. I am. Vivian walked toward the door, and Miles followed, leaving Grant standing alone in the conference room, looking like a man who'd bet everything on the wrong hand. They didn't go back to the reception. They walked straight through the lobby, past the concerned-looking desk clerk, and out into the storm that was still raging like the city had decided to bury itself in white. The valet brought the car around, the same sleek sedan that had brought them here a lifetime ago, and they climbed inside. The driver looked at them in the rearview mirror. Where to? Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then she gave an address Miles didn't recognize. Your place? He asked. Yes. She looked at him, and her expression was uncertain in ways he'd never seen. Unless you'd rather I drop you home. Miles thought about his empty apartment, the frozen dinner, the silence. He thought about Emma, safe at her sleepover. He thought about this impossible night and the woman beside him who'd paid him to pretend and then made everything real. I'd rather stay with you, he said. Vivian's smile was small and fragile and worth everything. The drive took 20 minutes through streets that had turned into Arctic tundra. The car climbed through Back Bay, into Beacon Hill, and finally pulled up to a building that screamed understated wealth, all glass and steel and architectural ambition. They took the elevator to the top floor, and Vivian unlocked a door that led to a penthouse that took Miles's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, Now nothing but white and shadows. The space was immaculate. Designer furniture, expensive art, everything perfectly placed and perfectly cold. It looked like a showroom, not a home. Miles could see Vivian in the sharp edges and careful control, but he couldn't see any warmth. "It's beautiful," he said, because it was true. "It's empty," Vivian said, and that was true too. She moved to the windows, stared out at the storm. Miles stood behind her, close but not touching. "I don't know what happens next," she said quietly. "Neither do I. This wasn't supposed to be real." "I know. I hired you. I paid you. This whole thing was a transaction." It was. Miles stepped closer until he could feel her warmth. But it's not anymore. Vivian turned to face him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "What if I can't do this? What if I'm too broken?" Miles kissed her again, softer this time, slower. A kiss that said all the things he didn't have words for yet. When he pulled back, Vivian was crying, and he brushed the tears away with his thumbs. "Stay," she whispered. "Okay. I mean it. Stay. Not just tonight. Stay and see if this is real. Stay and help me figure out how to be human instead of perfect. Stay and—" "I'll stay," Miles said, "for as long as you'll let me." Vivian collapsed into him then, and he held her in the middle of her beautiful, empty penthouse while the storm buried the city and everything changed. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other while the storm raged outside and the silence of the penthouse settled around them like snow. Eventually, Vivian pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand in a gesture so unguarded it made Miles's chest ache. "I should get out of this dress," she said, her voice rough from crying. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, started toward what Miles assumed was the bedroom, then stopped and turned back. "There's wine in the kitchen. Help yourself to anything. I'll just be a few minutes." Miles watched her disappear down a hallway, then turned to survey the penthouse properly. In the soft glow of recessed lighting, the space felt even more like a carefully constructed stage set. The furniture was all clean lines and neutral tones, a gray sectional that looked expensive and uncomfortable, a glass coffee table with nothing on it, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than his car. The kitchen was all marble and stainless steel, pristine enough to suggest it had never been used for anything as messy as actual cooking. He found the wine cabinet, because of course there was a wine cabinet, and selected a bottle at random. The label was in French. He had no idea if it was good or not, but given everything else in this place, it was probably worth more than he made in a week. He found glasses in a cabinet that held exactly 6 of them, all matching, all perfect. Miles poured 2 generous glasses and carried them to the windows. The city had vanished completely now, swallowed by white. He could barely make out the building across the street. It felt like they were floating in space, unmoored from everything. His phone buzzed, a text from Rebecca, Emma's friend's mom. "Girls are crashed out. Emma wanted me to tell you they built a fort the size of my living room and ate their weight in popcorn. She's fine. You good in the storm?" Miles smiled, typed back quickly. "Safe and warm. Thanks for keeping her. I'll pick her up in the morning. No rush. They're already planning pancakes and a movie marathon. Stay safe." He pocketed his phone and heard Vivian's footsteps behind him. When he turned, his breath caught. She'd changed into joggers and an oversized sweater that looked soft and worn, her hair down around her shoulders, face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked young and vulnerable and nothing like the woman who'd commanded a boardroom or survived her mother's interrogation. She looked real. "Better?" he asked, offering her a glass. "Much." She took it, sipped, and made a face. "This is terrible wine. It's French. It's also terrible." She moved to the cabinet, pulled out a different bottle. "This one's better. The expensive ones are usually overrated." They switched bottles, and Miles had to admit she was right. The new wine was smoother, warmer, actually tasted like something he might enjoy. They settled on the sectional, which was just as uncomfortable as it looked, and sat in silence for a moment, both holding their glasses like shields. "So," Vivian said finally, "this is awkward." "Little bit. I don't usually bring men home." "I figured. I don't usually break down crying at weddings either." "That one I didn't figure." Miles turned to look at her. "You seem pretty put together until tonight." Vivian laughed, bitter and sharp. "I'm very good at seeming. It's basically my entire skill set." She took a long drink. "Did you mean what you said? About staying. Yes. Even though this is insane, even though I hired you and this whole thing started as a transaction and we barely know each other, even though. Why? Miles considered the question, turned it over in his mind. He could give her easy answers, say he was curious, or lonely, or just caught up in the moment. But she'd been honest with him all night, brutally so. She deserved the same. Because when my wife died, I forgot how to feel anything except responsible, he said quietly. I went to work, I took care of Emma, I paid the bills, I showed up for parent-teacher conferences and made dinner and helped with homework. And I told myself that was enough. That being a good dad and a reliable employee was all I needed to be. Vivian watched him, silent. And then tonight, you opened your office door and asked me to help you. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt something other than numb. I felt needed in a way that wasn't about obligation. I felt like maybe I could be more than just functional. Miles met her eyes. You made me feel alive again, even if it was just pretend. It wasn't pretend, Vivian whispered. Not for me. Not after. She stopped, looked away. Not after you held me on that terrace and didn't try to fix me. Everyone always wants to fix me, but you just held me and let me break. You needed to break. I know, I just didn't know I could do it without falling apart completely. She set down her wine glass, pulled her knees up to her chest. Can I tell you something? Anything. I didn't end my engagement with Grant because he was wrong for me. I mean, he was, but that's not why. Vivian's voice went quiet, distant. I ended it because 2 weeks before the wedding, I woke up and realized I didn't love him. I didn't even like him very much. And the thought of spending my life with someone I was just tolerating because he checked the right boxes terrified me more than being alone. Miles didn't say anything, just let her talk. My mother was furious. She'd spent months planning that wedding, had designed the whole thing like a military campaign, and I called it off with a text message and a returned ring because I couldn't face the conversation, couldn't face admitting that I'd rather be alone and broken than together and fake. Vivian's hands were shaking now. Grant was right about one thing. I am married to my work. Because work doesn't require vulnerability. Work doesn't ask me to be anything except competent. And competent I can do. It's the rest of it I can't figure out. What's the rest of it? Connection, trust, letting someone see the parts of me that aren't perfect and believing they'll stay anyway. She looked at him, and her eyes were raw. I've been running my whole life, Miles, building walls and calling it strength, isolating myself and calling it independence. And tonight, standing on that terrace with you, I realized I'm exhausted. I don't want to run anymore. Then don't. It's not that simple. Why not? Vivian stood abruptly, started pacing. Because what happens when you realize I'm too much work? When you see how broken I actually am and decide it's not worth it? When Emma meets me and hates me because I'm the woman taking her dad's attention? When my mother starts her campaign to destroy you because you're not the right pedigree? When the board finds out we're together and questions my judgment? When... Vivian. Miles stood, caught her hands, made her stop moving. You're catastrophizing. I'm being realistic. You're being terrified. There's a difference. She pulled her hands free, wrapped her arms around herself. How can you be so calm about this? How are you not freaking out? Oh, I'm freaking out, Miles said. I'm completely freaking out. I just spent the evening at a luxury wedding pretending to be someone I'm not, kissed a woman I barely know in the middle of a blizzard, and now I'm standing in her penthouse drinking wine and talking about feelings. This is possibly the most insane thing I've done in my entire life. Then why? Because sometimes the insane thing is the right thing. Miles stepped closer. After Sarah died, everyone told me to take it slow. Don't make any big decisions. Don't change anything. Just survive. And I listened. I played it safe. I stayed numb. And you know what? It was killing me. Slowly, quietly, but killing me all the same. Vivian's expression cracked. I don't want to be another big decision you regret. You won't be. You can't know that. You're right. I can't. Miles reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But I'd rather risk regretting this than spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. For a long moment, Vivian just stared at him. Then she closed the distance between them and kissed him hard, desperate, like she was trying to prove something to herself. Miles kissed her back, one hand cupping her face, the other sliding to her waist. And this time there was no performance, no audience, no script, just two people choosing each other in the face of every logical reason not to. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Vivian rested her forehead against his chest. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Neither do I." "What if we're terrible at it?" "Then we'll be terrible at it together." She laughed, shaky and wet. "That's a terrible plan." "You have a better one?" "No." Vivian pulled back to look at him. "But I should warn you, I'm really bad at this. Relationships, I mean. I work too much. I don't know how to communicate feelings without turning them into data points. I panic when things get too intimate and I push people away. I'm controlling and stubborn, and I've been told I'm emotionally unavailable more times than I can count." "Okay. Okay, that's it? That's all you have to say?" Miles smiled. "I'm a widower with an 8-year-old daughter who still sleeps with the light on sometimes because she's afraid of losing me too. I haven't been on a date in 3 years. I cry during Pixar movies. I have no idea how to balance being a dad and being a person. I'm terrified of letting anyone get close enough to hurt me again. So yeah. Okay, we're both a mess. Let's be a mess together." Vivian stared at him for a heartbeat, then burst out laughing. Real laughter, not the polite social version she'd deployed at the wedding. She laughed until tears ran down her face, until she had to sit down, until Miles was laughing too, even though he wasn't entirely sure what was funny. "We're ridiculous," she said when she could breathe again. "Completely. This is never going to work." "Probably not. But you want to try anyway." "I really do." Vivian shook her head, still smiling. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Can't it be both?" She pulled him down onto the couch beside her, tucked herself against his side like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Miles wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and they sat there listening to the storm and not talking about all the ways this could go wrong. "Tell me about Emma," Vivian said eventually. Miles tensed without meaning to. "What do you want to know?" "Everything, what she's like, what makes her laugh, what she's afraid of, what you tell her about her mom." It was such a simple request, but it hit Miles like a freight train. No one ever asked about Emma. People asked how she was doing, asked if she was adjusting okay, asked if Miles needed help with childcare. But no one ever just asked him to talk about his daughter like she was a person worth knowing. "She's brilliant," Miles said quietly. "Like genuinely brilliant. She taught herself to code last year using YouTube videos because she wanted to make a game about astronauts. She reads at a 6th grade level. She asks questions about everything. Why the sky is blue, how airplanes stay up, whether infinity has an end." Vivian smiled against his shoulder. "She sounds like you." "She's better than me. Braver. After Sarah died, Emma was the one who held us together. She was 6 years old, and she made me lists of things we had to do every day. Eat breakfast, brush teeth, go to school, read a story. She made me laugh when I wanted to disappear. She asked me hard questions about death and grief, and she didn't accept easy answers." "What kind of hard questions?" Miles was quiet for a moment, remembering. "About 6 months after Sarah died, Emma asked me if her mom was watching her from somewhere, and I didn't know what to say. Sarah wasn't religious. I'm not religious. We never talked about heaven or afterlife or any of that. So I told her the truth, that I didn't know. That some people believed in that and some didn't, and it was okay not to be sure." "What did she say?" "She said that was a terrible answer." Miles smiled despite the ache in his chest. "She said if I didn't know, then I should help her figure it out." So we spent the next 3 months reading everything we could find about what different people believed happens after death. Philosophy, religion, science, all of it. And at the end, Emma decided that her mom was still with us because we remembered her. That memory was a kind of immortality. Vivian lifted her head to look at him. "She really said that?" "Word for word. She was 6. She sounds extraordinary." "She is." Miles met Vivian's eyes. "And she's going to have questions about you, about us, about why I'm suddenly spending time with someone who isn't just a work colleague or her friend's parent. Are you ready for that?" Vivian's expression turned uncertain. "I don't know. I've never been around kids much. What if she doesn't like me? What if I say the wrong thing? What if—" "She'll like you." "You can't know that." "She'll like you because you're honest. Kids can smell bullshit a mile away, and you don't do bullshit. You might not know how to talk to an 8-year-old, but you know how to be real. That's what matters. Vivian bit her lip. What if I'm terrible at this? The whole parenting adjacent thing. Then you'll be terrible at it, and we'll figure it out. Miles squeezed her shoulder. I'm not expecting you to be her mother, Vivian. I'm not expecting you to be anything except yourself. But if we're going to try this, actually try this, then Emma's part of it. She's part of me. And I need to know you're okay with that. I'm terrified of that. That's not an answer. Vivian was quiet for a long moment, and Miles could feel her thinking, weighing variables, running scenarios. Finally, she said, I'm okay with it. Terrified, but okay with it. Good enough. They sat in silence again, and Miles felt exhaustion starting to creep in around the edges. It had been the longest night of his life. Hours of performance and emotion and revelation that had left him wrung out and strangely exhilarated. You should stay, Vivian said, reading his mind. The storm's not letting up. The roads are impossible. And She stopped, started again. I don't want you to leave. I don't want to leave either. Guest rooms down the hall, second door on the left. Miles pulled back to look at her. Guest room? Vivian's cheeks flushed. I know we kissed. Twice. But this is all happening so fast, and I don't want to, I want to, but I think we should slow down, Miles finished for her. I agree. Relief washed over her face. Really? Really? This matters too much to rush. Miles stood, pulled her up with him. But for the record, staying in your guest room is still the most intimate thing I've done with anyone since Sarah died. So even if we're taking it slow, this is still big, Vivian whispered. Yeah. She walked him down the hallway, showed him a bedroom that was as impersonal as the rest of the penthouse. Expensive furniture, neutral colors, no personality. But the bed looked comfortable, and there were fresh towels in the attached bathroom, and Miles was too tired to care about interior design. I'll be right across the hall if you need anything, Vivian said from the doorway. Okay. She started to leave, then turned back. Miles? Yeah? Thank you. For tonight. For all of it. You paid me $30,000. I should be thanking you. Vivian's expression went serious. I'm not paying you anymore. This isn't a transaction. If you stay, if we do this, it's because we both want to, not because of money. Miles crossed to her, kissed her forehead gently. I want to. Even though I'm a disaster, especially because you're a disaster. She smiled, soft and real, then disappeared into her own room. Miles closed the door and stood there for a moment, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning he'd woken up in his tiny apartment, gotten Emma off to school, gone to work expecting a normal day. Now he was standing in a penthouse in Beacon Hill, having agreed to try a relationship with a woman he'd kissed for the first time 3 hours ago, and somehow it felt like the sanest decision he'd made in years. He borrowed a t-shirt from the drawer. Everything in this guest room was pristine and new, probably never worn, and climbed into bed. The sheets were expensive and cold. He missed the worn comfort of his own bed, missed the sounds of his own apartment. But he didn't regret being here. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number that he realized must be Vivian. Are you asleep? He smiled, typed back. Not yet. Me neither. This is weird, right? Texting from across the hall? Completely weird. But kind of nice? Yeah, kind of nice. There was a pause, then another message. I'm glad you stayed. Me too. Now go to sleep, Vivian. Bossy, you have no idea. He could almost hear her laughing. The text stopped, and Miles set his phone on the nightstand. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the city. But inside the penthouse, everything was quiet and warm. Miles closed his eyes, and for the first time in 2 years, fell asleep feeling something other than alone. He woke to weak morning light filtering through unfamiliar curtains and the smell of coffee. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then it all came flooding back. The wedding, the terrace, the kiss. Vivian's confession in this very apartment. Miles checked his phone. 7:30. 3 texts from Emma, all sent within the last 15 minutes. Dad? Are you awake? Dad? Rebecca's mom is making French toast. Dad, can I stay for lunch too? Please. He smiled, typed back. Good morning to you too. Yes to lunch. Have fun. Love you. Yes. Love you too. He got up, pulled on his borrowed t-shirt and the suit pants from last night, wrinkled now but serviceable, and followed the smell of coffee down the hallway. The penthouse looked different in daylight, less like a showroom and more like what it was, a beautiful, expensive cage. Vivian was in the kitchen, standing at the counter with her back to him, wearing yoga pants and a tank top, her hair pulled up in a messy knot. She was pouring coffee into 2 mugs, and Miles had the surreal thought that this was what normal people did, made coffee for each other in the morning, existed in each other's spaces without performance or pretense. Morning, he said. She jumped, nearly spilled the coffee. I didn't hear you. Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. It's fine. I'm not used to people being here. She handed him a mug. Milk and sugar are... Black's good. They stood on opposite sides of the kitchen island, holding their coffee like shields again, and Miles couldn't help but laugh. What? Vivian asked. This. Us. We went from kissing in a blizzard to awkward morning after coffee without any of the usual steps in between. Is there a usual way to do this? No idea. I've been married since I was 24. This is all new territory. Vivian took a sip of her coffee, studying him over the rim. Do you regret it? Last night? No. Do you? No. She set down her mug. But I woke up at 5 this morning convinced you'd realize how insane this is and leave while I was still asleep. I don't ghost. Everyone ghosts. I don't. Miles moved around the island, stopped close enough to touch but didn't. I told you I was staying. I meant it. Even in the cold light of day. Even now that you've seen my apartment and realized I'm the kind of person who owns 6 matching wine glasses and nothing else. Even now. Vivian's phone buzzed on the counter. Then again and again. She glanced at it and her expression went carefully blank. What? Miles asked. Nothing, just... The phone buzzed again. She picked it up, scrolled through what looked like dozens of messages, and her face went pale. Vivian? She handed him the phone without a word. Miles looked at the screen and felt his stomach drop. The messages were all from different people, colleagues, board members, friends of the family, but they all contained variations of the same thing. Screenshots, photos, social media posts. Someone had photographed them at the wedding. Multiple someones. There were pictures of them dancing, of Vivian crying on the terrace, of Miles kissing her in the snow. And someone had posted them with commentary that ranged from curious to cruel. Vivian Hale's mystery man. Who is he? CEO. Brings data analyst to family wedding. Romance or scandal? Ice Queen Hale melts down at brother's wedding. New boyfriend to blame? The worst one was from a society blog Miles had never heard of, complete with a zoomed-in photo of Vivian's tear-streaked face and a headline that made his blood boil. Perfect CEO cracks. Vivian Hale's public breakdown raises questions about leadership stability. Who did this? Miles asked, his voice tight. Does it matter? Vivian took the phone back, scrolled through more messages with mechanical precision. It's out there now. By Monday morning, every business publication in the city will have picked it up. The board will have questions. My mother will call. Grant will... She stopped, pressed her fingers to her temples. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. We didn't do anything wrong. That's not how it works. Vivian's voice was flat, empty. Perception is reality, and the perception is that I'm unstable, emotional, compromised. That's bullshit. That's business. She set down her phone, leaned against the counter. I've spent 3 years building a reputation for being unshakable, competent, above the mess of normal human emotion. And in one night, I destroyed it. Miles wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was catastrophizing again, but he'd seen the headlines. He understood enough about corporate politics to know this could be damaging. What do you want to do? He asked quietly. Vivian looked at him, and her eyes were hollow. I don't know. Do you want me to leave? Make a statement that we're not together, that it was just... No. The word came out sharp, almost desperate. No, I don't want that. Then what? I want to rewind time. I want to go back to yesterday morning when I was alone and miserable, but at least people respected me. She laughed, bitter and broken. I want to not care what they think, but I do care. I hate that I care, but I do. Miles moved closer, took her hands. Look at me. She did, reluctantly. You're the most competent person I've ever met, he said. You run a multi-million-dollar company. You make decisions that affect hundreds of people. You're brilliant and strategic and yes, sometimes cold. But last night you were also human. You were real. And anyone who sees that as a weakness is an idiot. The board isn't full of idiots. Then they'll understand. You don't know them. You don't know how this works. You're right, I don't. Miles squeezed her hands. But I know you. And I know you didn't get where you are by running from hard things. So what are we going to do? Hide? Pretend last night didn't happen? Or face this head on? Vivian stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, her expression shifted from panic to something harder, more familiar. The CEO was reassembling herself brick by brick. We face it, she said. How? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. She pulled her hands free, straightened her shoulders. I need to make some calls, do damage control before this gets worse. Okay? And you should probably… She gestured vaguely. Go home. Check on Emma. Get back to normal life. It felt like dismissal, but Miles understood. Vivian was retreating into the only mode she knew: control, strategy, walls. I'll go, he said. But this isn't over, Vivian. Whatever happens with the board or the press or your mother, this isn't over. You can't know that. Yes, I can. He kissed her, quick and firm. We're in this together. Remember? She nodded, but her eyes were already distant, already planning 3 moves ahead. Miles gathered his things, his wrinkled suit, his coat, the script folder he'd never actually needed, and called a car. The streets were still buried under snow, the city moving slow and cautious in the aftermath of the storm. When the car arrived, Vivian walked him to the door. I'll call you, she said. You better. Miles, she stopped, started again. Thank you for not running. I told you I don't ghost. He left her standing in the doorway of her perfect, empty penthouse and rode home through a city that looked like it had been remade overnight. Everything was white and clean and starting over. Miles just hoped they'd get the chance to do the same. Miles's apartment felt smaller than he remembered, the walls closer, the air staler. He stood in his living room, still wearing the wrinkled suit from the wedding, and stared at the life he'd built from the wreckage of loss. Emma's artwork taped to the fridge, the stack of library books on the coffee table, the framed photo of Sarah on the mantel smiling like she had all the time in the world. It felt like looking at a museum exhibit of someone else's existence. His phone buzzed. Not Vivian. A text from Rebecca. Emma wants to know if she can stay for dinner too. We're making homemade pizza. No pressure, I know you probably want her home. Miles typed back quickly. Dinner sounds great. Thank you. I'll pick her up around 7. Perfect. Everything okay? You seem different. He stared at the message for a long moment, wondering what Rebecca had picked up on, how his entire life could shift in 12 hours and somehow be visible through text messages. Finally he wrote, Everything's fine. Just a long night. The storm was brutal. Glad you're safe. Miles showered, changed into jeans and a sweater that felt like his actual life, and tried to figure out what the hell he was doing. 24 hours ago, his biggest concern had been finishing quarterly reports. Now he was involved with his CEO, splashed across society blogs, and facing a Monday morning that promised to be a disaster. His phone rang. Vivian's name on the screen made his heart jump. Hey, he answered. Are you home? Her voice was tight, controlled, back in CEO mode. Yeah, just got in. Good. We need to talk strategy. Strategy? For Monday, for the office, for… She paused, and he heard the crack in her composure. For whatever comes next. Miles sat down on his couch, prepared for the worst. What happened? I spent the last 2 hours on conference calls. The board wants a meeting Monday morning. My mother has called 17 times. I've been texted by 3 different PR firms offering crisis management services. Vivian's laugh was sharp and humorless. Apparently I'm a crisis. You're not a crisis. The internet disagrees. There are think pieces, Miles. Actual think pieces about whether emotional CEOs are good for shareholder value. That's insane. That's capitalism. Papers rustled in the background. Here's what we're looking at. The board meeting is at 9. They're going to ask about my judgment, about whether this relationship represents a conflict of interest, about whether I can still lead effectively. What are you going to tell them? The truth. That we met 3 months ago, that we've been dating seriously for the last 6 weeks, that I disclosed it to HR as required by company policy for superior subordinate relationships. Her voice was steady now, clinical. I backdated the disclosure forms this morning. Miles felt something cold settle in his stomach. You lied. I protected us both. If they think this just started, if they think it's a whirlwind thing based on one night, they'll question everything. But if it's established, documented, following proper procedure, it's still a lie, Vivian. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, I know. We could just tell them the truth, that we met at the wedding, that this is new, that we're figuring it out as we go. And give them ammunition to question my stability? To suggest I'm making reckless decisions? Vivian's voice turned sharp. I can't do that. I won't. So instead you're building a whole false history, making up disclosure dates, creating evidence that doesn't exist. I'm managing the situation. You're lying. I'm surviving. The words came out raw, desperate. Do you know what they'll do if they think I'm unstable? They'll push me out, find a reason to remove me, replace me with someone safer, someone who doesn't cry at weddings or kiss subordinates in snowstorms. I've worked too hard to lose it all because I finally let myself feel something. Miles pressed his fingers to his temples, trying to think through the fog of exhaustion and confusion. What do you need from me? Monday morning, you'll get called in. HR will ask you to confirm the timeline. You need to say we met at the charity gala in early December, that we went on our first official date December 10th, that we disclosed the relationship to HR on January 5th. Vivian, please. Her voice cracked. Please, Miles, I'm asking you to do this one thing. Lie for me. Protect us, just until the board meeting is over and the panic dies down. Miles thought about Emma, about the values he was trying to teach her. Honesty, integrity, doing the right thing even when it was hard. He thought about what Sarah would say if she could see him now, about to lie to corporate HR to protect a relationship that had started with a transaction and somehow become real. But he also thought about Vivian sobbing on that terrace, about the way she'd whispered, "Help me," like it was the hardest sentence she'd ever spoken, about the woman underneath the CEO who just wanted to be human without being punished for it. Okay, he said quietly. Okay? I'll back up your story, but Vivian, after this, no more lies. If we're doing this, if we're actually trying, we do it honestly. I promise. She exhaled, shaky with relief. Thank you. What else? Monday, you need to act normal. Go to your desk, do your work. Don't engage with anyone who asks about the wedding. If people gossip, ignore it. And whatever you do, don't come to my office. We can't even talk? Not at work. Not until this dies down. Vivian's voice softened. I know it's not fair. I know it's asking a lot. But if we're seen together, if there's any suggestion that this is affecting my judgment or your performance, I get it. Miles did get it, even if he hated it. So we just pretend nothing happened? At work? Yes. Outside of work? She paused. I'd like to see you, tonight, if possible, after you pick up Emma. I can't bring her to your place. She'll have questions I'm not ready to answer yet. Then come after she's asleep, or we could meet somewhere. I don't care where, I just... Vivian's carefully constructed composure finally shattered. I just need to see you, to know this is still real and I haven't destroyed it. You haven't destroyed anything. Yet. Miles checked the time, 2:30. Emma wouldn't be home until 7. Give me your address again. I'll come by around 4. We can talk this through properly. You don't have to. I want to. The silence that followed felt different than before. Warmer, grateful, intimate, in a way that had nothing to do with physical proximity. Okay, Vivian said finally. 4 o'clock. She hung up, and Miles sat there staring at his phone, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. Lying to HR, covering up a relationship's real timeline. Getting involved in corporate politics he barely understood. Every logical part of his brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, that he should walk away before it got worse, that getting entangled with his CEO was the definition of poor judgment. But the rest of him, the part that had been numb for 2 years, the part that had forgotten what it felt like to want something beyond mere survival, that part was already getting his coat. The drive back to Vivian's penthouse took 40 minutes through snow-clogged streets. The city was still digging out, cars abandoned on side streets, sidewalks treacherous with ice. Miles passed 3 accidents and a bus that had slid into a snowbank. By the time he reached Beacon Hill, his hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel and his nerves were shot. Vivian answered her door looking different than she had that morning. She'd changed into jeans and a cashmere sweater, her hair still up but loose now, a few strands escaping. She looked softer, younger, less like a CEO, and more like a woman who'd spent the morning making phone calls that slowly chipped away at her carefully maintained control. "Hi," she said. "Hi." They stood in the doorway for an awkward beat, then both moved at once. Miles stepping forward, Vivian pulling him inside. And suddenly they were kissing, like they'd been apart for weeks instead of hours. Vivian's hands fisted in his coat, Miles cupped her face, and for a moment everything else fell away. The lies, the board meeting, the society blogs. None of it mattered except the warmth of her mouth and the way she pressed against him like he was something solid in a world that had started spinning too fast. When they broke apart, Vivian rested her forehead against his chest. "I've been spiraling all morning," she whispered. "I know. I keep thinking about all the ways this could fall apart, all the variables I can't control. That's not spiraling. That's just anxiety." "There's a difference?" Miles smiled despite everything. "Come on, let's sit down." They moved to the living room, and this time Miles noticed details he'd missed the night before. A blanket draped over the back of the couch that looked actually used. A coffee mug on the table with lipstick on the rim. A book. A real book. Not some business theory tome. Lying open on the arm of a chair. Small signs that someone actually lived here, even if that life looked lonely. They sat on the uncomfortable couch, and Vivian immediately pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. Defensive posture. Shutting down. "Talk to me," Miles said. "About what?" "About why you're so terrified of the board finding out the truth." Vivian was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the windows and the white city beyond. "Do you know what it's like being a woman in tech?" "No. Every decision gets scrutinized twice as hard. Every emotion gets labeled as weakness. Every relationship gets questioned as a conflict of interest or poor judgment or proof that you're not serious about the work." Her voice was flat, reciting facts she'd internalized long ago. "I got promoted to CEO 3 years ago. I was 32. Youngest person to ever hold the position at our company, and do you know what the press coverage focused on?" Miles had a guess, but stayed silent. "My appearance, my relationship status. Whether I'd be able to handle the pressure, whether I was too young, too inexperienced, too female." Vivian's hands tightened around her knees. "I've spent 3 years proving them wrong. Working 80-hour weeks, making the hard calls, turning the company around, building a reputation for being unshakable. And in one night, I undid all of it." "You didn't undo anything. You were human at your brother's wedding. That's allowed." "Not for me, it isn't." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were dark with something that looked like despair. "Do you know what Grant said to me on that terrace? Before you came over?" Miles felt his jaw tighten. "What?" "He said I'd always choose the company over a person. That it was who I was, cold, calculating, incapable of putting anything above my ambition. And the worst part is, he wasn't entirely wrong." Vivian's voice cracked. "I have chosen the company over relationships, over family dinners and friendships, and any kind of normal life, because the alternative was being seen as less serious, less committed, less worthy of respect. That's not fair to you." "Fair doesn't matter. It's reality." She turned to face him fully. "So yes, I'm lying about our timeline. Yes, I'm manipulating the narrative because if I don't, they'll use this against me. They'll say I'm compromised, emotional, making reckless decisions. and I won't give them that ammunition. Miles understood her fear. He even understood her logic. But something about it still felt wrong, like they were building their foundation on sand. What if they find out? He asked quietly. What if someone from the wedding talks? What if the timeline doesn't hold up under scrutiny? Then I'll handle it. How? I don't know yet, but I will. Vivian reached out, took his hand. I know you hate lying. I know this goes against everything you believe in, but I'm asking you to trust me, just for a few days, just until the board meeting is over and things calm down. Miles looked at their joined hands, thought about all the ways this could go sideways. But he also thought about Vivian's face on that terrace, about the way she'd broken open and let him see the truth underneath. After the board meeting, we tell the truth, he said. We come clean about the actual timeline. We deal with the consequences honestly. Vivian hesitated, and Miles saw the calculation in her eyes. Weighing risks, measuring outcomes, trying to find the path that minimized damage. Vivian, he pressed, after the board meeting, promise me. I promise, she said finally. After the board meeting, we figure out how to be honest. It wasn't quite the commitment he wanted, but it was enough for now. They spent the next hour going over the fabricated timeline, making sure their stories aligned. Vivian had thought of everything. The restaurant where they'd supposedly had their first date, the movies they'd claimed to see together, even the conversations they'd allegedly had about Emma. It was thorough and depressing, like studying for a test on a life that didn't exist. You're really good at this, Miles said, and he didn't mean it as a compliment. Vivian caught the tone. At lying? At constructing narratives, building stories, making people believe what you want them to believe. It's part of the job. Investor presentations, board meetings, media interviews, they're all just stories. You figure out what people need to hear, and you give it to them. That sounds exhausting. It is. Vivian set down the notes she'd been reviewing. But it's also how you survive in a world that's looking for any excuse to tear you down. Miles wanted to argue that not everyone was looking to tear her down, that maybe she'd built walls so high she couldn't see the people who actually wanted to support her. But he kept quiet. This wasn't the time. His phone alarm went off, reminder to pick up Emma. Vivian glanced at the time, and something flickered across her face. You should go, she said. Yeah. Miles stood, suddenly reluctant to leave. When will I see you again? I don't know. This week is going to be insane. Vivian, I'll text you, I promise. But right now I need to prepare for Monday. Run through scenarios, practice responses, make sure I'm ready for whatever they throw at me. Miles pulled her up from the couch, wrapped his arms around her. She melted into him, and for a moment they just stood there, holding each other against the weight of everything coming. We're gonna be okay, he said, even though he wasn't sure he believed it. I hope so. He kissed her goodbye, tasting coffee and fear and determination, then forced himself to leave before he could change his mind about any of this. The drive to Rebecca's house was a blur. Miles's brain was too full of timelines and lies, and the growing sense that he'd just stepped off a cliff and was still waiting to hit bottom. When he pulled up to the modest Colonial in Somerville, Emma was already waiting by the window, her face lighting up when she saw his car. She burst out the front door, bundled in her winter coat and trailing her overnight bag. Rebecca appeared behind her, waving from the doorway. Dad! Emma launched herself at him, and Miles caught her in a hug that felt like coming home. We made pizza and it was shaped like a dinosaur, and we watched 3 movies, and we built a fort so big we could stand up in it. Sounds like you had fun. It was the best. Emma pulled back, studying his face with the unnerving perception of 8-year-olds everywhere. You look tired. Long night. Storm was pretty bad. Were you stuck at work? Miles hesitated. Here it was, the first test of how honest he could be with his daughter. Actually, I went to a wedding. Emma's eyes went wide. A wedding? Whose wedding? Why didn't you tell me? Did you dance? Was there cake? One question at a time, kiddo. Miles laughed, leading her to the car. It was my boss's brother's wedding, and yes, there was cake. Did you bring me any? No. Rude. But Emma was grinning. She climbed into the back seat, buckled herself in. Was it fancy? Very fancy. Did you have to wear a suit? I did. Did you dance with anyone? The question hit harder than it should have. Miles met Emma's eyes in the rear-view mirror and saw genuine curiosity there. No agenda, no judgment, just his kid wanting to know about his life. I did, actually. Who? Miles took a breath. My boss, Ms. Hale. Emma processed this with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice. Is she nice? She is. Very smart, too. Do you like her? Yeah, I do. Like her, or just regular like? Miles couldn't help but smile. Like her. Oh. Emma was quiet for a moment as they pulled away from the curb. Then, carefully, is that okay? That you like someone? Miles's chest tightened. They'd never really talked about this. About him dating again. About what it would mean if someone else entered their carefully balanced life. He'd assumed he'd have more time before this conversation became relevant. What do you think? He asked gently. Emma stared out the window, watching the snowy streets slide past. I think Mom would want you to be happy. The simplicity of it, the pure, uncomplicated wisdom, nearly broke him. Yeah, Miles managed. I think she would too. So it's okay if you like Ms. Hale, as long as she's nice to you and to me. Emma's voice turned fierce. If she's mean to you, I'll tell her off. Miles laughed, feeling tears prick his eyes. Deal. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, and Miles felt some of the tension from the day start to ease. This was what mattered. Emma happy and safe, his life stable enough to give her security. Whatever happened with Vivian, whatever fallout came from the wedding photos and the board meeting and the lies he'd agreed to tell, he had to protect this. Had to make sure Emma didn't get caught in the crossfire. Dad? Emma's voice was smaller now. Yeah, kiddo? Can I meet her? Miss Ubasituas Sasis. Hale? Like, for real? Not just at work? Miles's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Maybe. Eventually. If things work out. What if I don't like her? Then we'll deal with that if it happens. What if she doesn't like me? Miles pulled the car over, turned to look at Emma directly. That's not possible. How do you know? Because you're brilliant and funny and kind, and anyone who doesn't like you is clearly defective. He reached back, squeezed her hand. But, Emma, I need you to understand something. Ms. Hale and I just started, whatever this is. It's really new, and it might not work out. So I don't want you to get too attached to the idea yet, okay? Emma nodded solemnly. Okay. But Dad? Yeah? I'm glad you like someone. You've been sad for a really long time. The observation hit him like a physical blow. I didn't think you noticed. I always notice. Emma's eyes were too wise for 8. You smile more now than you did last year, and you laugh at my jokes again. So whoever Ms. Hale is, she must be making you happy. Miles didn't know how to tell her that it wasn't just Vivian, it was finally letting himself feel something beyond grief and responsibility. It was choosing to take a risk instead of playing it safe. It was Emma herself, growing up brave and honest and forcing him to be the same. I love you, kiddo, he said instead. I love you too, Dad. Now can we go home? I'm starving. You just ate dinosaur pizza. That was hours ago. Miles pulled back onto the road, and they spent the rest of the drive talking about Emma's fort construction techniques and whether it was scientifically possible for snow to last until summer. Normal things. Easy things. The kind of conversation that reminded Miles why he'd survived the last 2 years at all. That night, after Emma was fed and bathed and tucked into bed with her nightlight glowing soft blue against the walls, Miles sat alone in his living room with his phone in his hand. No messages from Vivian, no updates, no check-ins, nothing. He understood she was busy, understood she had a company to run and a crisis to manage. But part of him had hoped she'd reach out anyway, just to say goodnight or confirm they were still in this together. Around 11, he gave up waiting and sent a text himself. How are you holding up? The response came 20 minutes later. Surviving. Board meeting prep is brutal. How's Emma? Good. She knows I went to a wedding, asked if I danced with anyone. What did you tell her? The truth. That I like you. Even through text, he could feel Vivian's surprise. You told her? She's 8, not stupid. She would have figured it out eventually. What did she say? That it's okay as long as you're nice to me, and that if you're mean to me, she'll tell you off. There was a long pause. Then, I like her already. She wants to meet you. Eventually, another pause. That terrifies me. Me too. But we'll figure it out. Will we? Miles stared at the question, hearing all the fear and doubt underneath. Yeah, we will. I hope you're right. I should go. Early morning tomorrow. Need to finish these prep documents. Okay. Good luck Monday. Miles? Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For lying for me. For staying. For not giving up when this got complicated. It was always going to get complicated. I know. But thank you anyway. Good night. Good night, Vivian. Miles set down his phone and stared at the ceiling, wondering how his life had turned into this. 3 days ago, he'd been a widowed single dad with a boring job and a quiet existence. Now he was tangled up with his CEO, preparing to lie to HR, caught between two versions of honesty that both felt wrong. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Vivian on that terrace, broken and real, and choosing to trust him anyway. He saw Emma's face when she said it was okay for him to like someone. He saw a future that might be messy and complicated and absolutely terrifying, but at least it was something other than numb. He fell asleep on his couch, still wearing his clothes, and dreamed of snowstorms and women who cried in corner offices and 8-year-olds who knew their fathers better than their fathers knew themselves. Monday morning arrived too fast and felt like walking into an ambush. Miles got Emma off to school, drove to the office through streets still lined with dirty snow, and felt his stomach churn the entire elevator ride to the 43rd floor. The office was buzzing with energy that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with gossip. He could feel eyes on him the second he stepped off the elevator, hear the whispers that cut off when he walked past. His desk felt like a fishbowl. People found reasons to walk by, to glance over, to see if Miles Carter, boring data analyst, widowed single dad, least interesting person in the department, looked any different now that he'd been photographed kissing the CEO in a blizzard. He kept his head down, opened his laptop, pretended to focus on spreadsheets while his brain counted down the minutes until HR called him in. The summons came at 10:15. An email from Jennifer Wright, VP of Human Resources, with a subject line that made his hands shake. Please report to HR immediately. Confidential matter. Miles stood, aware of every eye tracking his movement, and walked to the elevator like a man heading to his execution. The HR office was on the 39th floor, all neutral colors and motivational posters that proclaimed things like, "Integrity is our foundation, and honesty builds trust." Miles sat in the waiting area feeling like a fraud, rehearsing the lies Vivian had scripted for him. Jennifer appeared in the doorway, 50s, sharp suit, expression carefully neutral. "Miles, thanks for coming down. This shouldn't take long." He followed her into a conference room where another HR rep sat with a laptop open. Standard witness procedure. Everything documented, everything recorded. "Have a seat," Jennifer said, gesturing to a chair across from them. "I'm sure you can guess why we asked you here." "I have some idea. There have been some photos circulating from this weekend. Photos of you and Ms. Hale at a family wedding. We need to verify a few things for our records." Miles's mouth was dry. "Okay. Are you currently in a romantic relationship with Vivian Hale?" Here it was. The moment to lie or tell the truth. Miles thought about Vivian preparing for her board meeting, about the career she'd built, about the way she'd whispered, "Help me," like her entire existence depended on his answer. "Yes," he said. Jennifer made a note. "How long has this relationship been ongoing?" "About 2 months." "And when did you disclose this relationship to HR as required by company policy?" Miles met Jennifer's eyes and lied smoothly. "January 5th, I filled out the disclosure form and submitted it electronically." The other HR rep typed something, frowned at her screen. "I'm showing a disclosure form filed on January 5th, yes, but it appears to have been submitted after hours, specifically at 11:47 p.m. Miles's heart stopped. Vivian had backdated the form, but apparently hadn't thought about submission timestamps. "I work late sometimes," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I filled it out after Emma went to bed." Jennifer and her colleague exchanged a glance that Miles couldn't read. And this relationship, Jennifer continued, it began after Ms. Hale was already your direct supervisor's supervisor? We don't work directly together. My supervisor is Marcus Chen. Vivian and I interact occasionally for company meetings, but there's no direct reporting line. Still, the optics are concerning. A CEO dating a subordinate, even several levels removed, raises questions about favoritism and conflicts of interest. I understand that, which is why we disclosed it properly. Miles forced himself to maintain eye contact. We've been careful to keep things professional at work. We don't interact any differently than we did before the relationship started. More typing, more note-taking. Miles felt sweat gathering at the back of his neck. The photos from the wedding, Jennifer said. They show Ms. Hale in what appears to be significant emotional distress. Can you speak to that? Miles chose his words carefully. It was her brother's wedding. Family events can be emotional. And your role in comforting her, that was as her boyfriend? Yes. Not as a concerned colleague who happened to be present? We attended the wedding together, as a couple. So yes, when she was upset, I comforted her. That's what you do for people you care about. Jennifer studied him for a long moment. Miles, I want to be clear about something. This company takes workplace relationships seriously. We have policies in place to prevent conflicts of interest and protect both parties. If this relationship is genuine, if it's been disclosed properly, and if it doesn't interfere with work, then we have no issues. But if there's anything you're not telling us, if the timeline is different, if there are details being omitted, now is the time to come clean. It was an out, a chance to tell the truth before the lies got bigger. Miles thought about what Vivian had said about survival, about how sometimes you had to manipulate the narrative to protect yourself. He thought about Emma asking if Ms. Hale was nice, about building a relationship on a foundation of dishonesty. There's nothing else, he said, and hated himself for it. Jennifer nodded slowly. All right, we'll need you to attend a follow-up meeting later this week. And going forward, any interaction with Ms. Hale at work should be documented and professional. No closed-door meetings, no appearance of favoritism. Clear? Crystal clear. You can go. Miles stood on shaking legs and walked out of the conference room, feeling like he'd just sold a piece of his soul. The elevator ride back to the 43rd floor was the longest 90 seconds of his life. When he got back to his desk, there was a note waiting. Handwritten on expensive stationery, unmistakably Vivian's handwriting. Thank you. Miles crumpled the note in his fist and shoved it in his pocket, then spent the rest of the day staring at spreadsheets and wondering what the hell he'd just done. The afternoon crawled by like time had turned viscous. Miles pushed numbers around spreadsheets without seeing them, responded to emails without reading them, and counted the minutes until he could leave this building and breathe air that didn't taste like lies. Every time someone walked past his desk, he tensed, waiting for another summons, another interrogation, another chance to compromise himself for a relationship that had started with a transaction and somehow become the most real thing in his life. At 4:30, his phone buzzed. Vivian, finally. Board meeting went better than expected. Can we talk tonight? Miles stared at the message, feeling the weight of everything unsaid between them. Your place or neutral territory? Yours? I'd like to see where you actually live, where Emma lives. The request felt significant, like she was asking permission to enter his real life instead of keeping everything sealed in her perfect penthouse. Okay, come around 8. Emma will be asleep by then. See you then. Miles pocketed his phone and tried to focus on work, but his brain kept circling back to the HR meeting, to Jennifer's careful questions and the timestamp that had nearly exposed Vivian's lie. They'd gotten lucky this time. But luck wasn't a strategy, and eventually the truth had a way of surfacing no matter how carefully you tried to bury it. He left at 5:30, picked up Emma from after-school care, and drove home through rush hour traffic that matched his mood, slow, frustrating, going nowhere fast. Emma chattered about her day, something about a science project involving volcanoes and baking soda, and Miles made the appropriate responses while his mind ran through everything he needed to say to Vivian. After dinner, mac and cheese from a box because he couldn't manage anything more complicated, Emma disappeared into her room to work on homework. Miles cleaned the kitchen, showered, changed into jeans and a sweater, and tried not to pace. At 7:45, he tucked Emma into bed. Big day tomorrow? She asked, already half asleep. Maybe. Why? You seem nervous, like when you have to give presentations at work. Miles smiled despite everything. Just expecting company. Emma's eyes opened wider. Is it Ms. Hale? Yeah. Can I meet her? Not tonight. You need sleep. But, Emma. Miles kissed her forehead. Soon, okay? But let me figure this out first. She sighed dramatically but settled into her pillows. Fine, but tell her I said hi. I will. And Dad? Don't be nervous. If you like her, she probably likes you too. The simplicity of 8-year-old logic made Miles's chest ache. Good night, kiddo. Night. He left her door cracked open, the nightlight casting blue shadows across her room, and went to wait. Vivian arrived at 8:03, wearing jeans and a coat that probably cost more than Miles's monthly rent. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, tension in her shoulders, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from fighting battles no one else could see. Hi, she said when Miles opened the door. Hi, come in. She stepped into his apartment and stood in the small entryway looking lost, like she'd entered a foreign country and didn't know the customs. Miles watched her take in the space. The worn couch, the cluttered coffee table, Emma's artwork covering the fridge, the general chaos of a life actually being lived. It's small, Miles said. It's real. Vivian's voice was quiet, almost reverent. You can tell people actually live here. Is that a compliment? It is. She turned to him, and her expression was raw in ways he'd never seen. I lied to the board today. Miles felt his stomach drop. What? Not about us. About other things. About my mother's calls and the society blog posts and whether any of it affected my judgment. Vivian moved to the couch, sat down heavily. They asked if I was emotionally compromised, if my personal life was interfering with my ability to lead. And I told them no. I told them I was fine, that the wedding photos were just bad optics, that nothing had changed. But everything's changed, Miles said quietly. Everything's changed. She looked up at him, tears threatening. I stood in that boardroom and performed perfect competence while my entire foundation was crumbling, and they believed me. They bought the story because I've spent 3 years teaching them that I don't break. Miles sat beside her, took her hand. What did they decide? That as long as the relationship was disclosed properly and doesn't affect work, they have no issue with it. That I've proven myself capable of separating personal and professional. That I remain their full confidence. Vivian's laugh was bitter. I won, Miles. I protected my position and our relationship and my reputation. I should feel relieved. But you don't. I feel like a fraud. She turned to face him fully. I'm sitting here in your apartment. Your real, messy, honest apartment, and all I can think about is how much of my life is performance. The penthouse that looks like a showroom, the clothes that cost a fortune, the carefully constructed image of perfection. And you, her voice broke. You live here with your daughter and her artwork on the fridge and dishes in the sink, and it's real, it's honest. And I don't know how to be that. Miles pulled her closer, felt her collapse into him. So learn. I don't know how. Then we figure it out together, one honest moment at a time. Vivian cried then, properly cried, the kind of deep sobs that shook her entire body. Miles held her the way he'd held her on the terrace, letting her break without trying to fix it. Around them, the apartment settled into evening sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, distant traffic, Emma's white noise machine down the hall. Normal, mundane, real. When Vivian finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were swollen, and she looked more beautiful than Miles had ever seen her. I can't keep lying, she whispered. To the board, to HR, to myself. I thought I could compartmentalize, keep the lies contained, but they're bleeding into everything. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to come clean, tell them the real timeline, accept whatever consequences come. Vivian's hands were shaking. Grant offered me that job. Chief Strategy Officer at Zenith Global. Better hours, less pressure, a chance to step back from being CEO. Miles felt cold settle in his chest. Are you going to take it? Part of me wants to. Part of me is so tired of fighting, of proving myself, of being perfect. She met his eyes. But taking that job would be running away. It would be choosing the easy path because I'm scared of the hard one. And I've been running my whole life. What's the hard path? Staying. Being honest about my mess. Admitting I'm human and I make mistakes and sometimes I fall apart at weddings. Vivian's voice strengthened. Choosing both. The career and the vulnerability. The ambition and the love. Not picking one or the other, but fighting for all of it. Miles felt something tight in his chest start to loosen. That's a good path. It's a terrifying path. The good ones usually are. Vivian laughed, watery and real. Emma's asleep? Yeah. Can I see her room? I want to see where she lives, what her life looks like. It was such a simple request, but Miles understood the weight of it. This was Vivian asking to enter his real world, to see the parts of his life that mattered most. Come on. He led her down the short hallway, past the bathroom with Emma's bath toys still scattered around the tub, past his own bedroom with the unmade bed and laundry basket overflowing. Emma's door was cracked open, the blue nightlight casting soft shadows. They stood in the doorway together, looking at Emma curled up under her comforter, her dark hair spread across the pillow, one hand clutching the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 2. The walls were covered with posters, planets and astronauts, and a periodic table she'd asked for last birthday. Her bookshelf overflowed with science fiction and fantasy novels. Her desk was chaos, markers and notebooks and a half-finished Lego spaceship. She's beautiful, Vivian whispered. She'd kill me for letting you see her room this messy. It's perfect. Vivian's voice was thick with emotion. This is what a childhood should look like. Messy and creative and safe. What did yours look like? Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Perfect. Controlled. Everything in its place. No mess allowed. She turned away from Emma's door, and Miles followed her back to the living room. My mother had very specific ideas about how a Hale should behave. We had tutors and etiquette lessons and summer programs designed to build the right kind of resume. I learned early that perfection earned approval and anything less earned disappointment. That sounds lonely. It was. Vivian sat back down on the couch, pulled her knees up. Daniel was the only one who rebelled. He chose a career my mother didn't approve of, married someone outside our social circle, built a life that made him happy instead of impressive. And I chose the opposite. I became everything she wanted, CEO by 32, perfect reputation, perfect control, perfect isolation. Miles sat beside her. You're not isolated anymore. Aren't I? I live alone in a penthouse that feels like a museum. I work 80 hours a week. Help. And you actually stayed. I'm still help, and you actually stayed. I'm still staying. Even after I made you lie to HR? Even after I dragged you into corporate politics and society gossip and family drama? Even after all of that, Vivian reached out, traced her fingers along his jaw. Why? Miles caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to want something beyond just surviving. Because you're brilliant and terrifying and more human than you think. Because my daughter asked if you were nice to me, and I want to find out the answer together. I want to be nice to you, Vivian whispered. I want to be honest and messy and real. I just don't know if I can. Then let's start small, one honest thing. Okay, Vivian took a shaky breath. I'm terrified of meeting Emma. I'm terrified she'll hate me, or I'll say the wrong thing, or she'll see right through me and realize I have no idea what I'm doing. That's very honest. Your turn. Miles thought about all the things he'd been holding back, all the fears he hadn't voiced. I'm terrified of falling in love with you and losing you, of letting someone matter again and having them disappear, of putting Emma through that pain. I'm terrified of the same thing, of mattering to you and failing, of not being enough. They sat with that honesty between them, heavy and true. Outside, the city hummed with late evening traffic. Inside Miles's small apartment, the silence felt sacred. What do we do now? Vivian asked finally. We try, honestly. No more lies, no more performance. We tell HR the real timeline and deal with the consequences. We introduce you to Emma when we're both ready. We figure out how to build something real instead of something perfect. The board might push back. There could be consequences for the false disclosure. Then we handle them. My mother is going to have opinions, loud opinions. We'll survive them. This is going to be hard, Vivian said. Yeah. Miles pulled her closer. But we're both pretty good at hard things. She kissed him then, soft and searching, a kiss that tasted like tears and truth and the terrifying possibility of something real. When they pulled apart, Vivian rested her forehead against his. I should probably go. Let you sleep. You have work tomorrow. Stay. The word came out before Miles could think about it. Not like that. But stay. Sleep in the guest room. Have breakfast with us in the morning. Meet Emma over cereal and orange juice instead of some formal planned thing. Vivian pulled back, eyes wide. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She laughed, real and bright. Okay, I'll stay. Miles found her a toothbrush, gave her one of his t-shirts to sleep in, showed her the guest room that was really just his office with a futon. It was nothing like her penthouse. The futon was lumpy. The room was cluttered with boxes. There was a water stain on the ceiling he kept meaning to fix. But Vivian looked at it like it was exactly what she needed. Thank you, she said from the doorway. For what? For letting me into your real life. For not making me perform. Miles kissed her goodnight, then retreated to his own room. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Vivian move around the office-turned-guest room, and marveled at how his life had turned into this. 3 days ago, he'd been stuck in an office during a blizzard. Now there was a brilliant, broken CEO sleeping down the hall, and he'd agreed to blow up both their careers for a chance at something honest. He must be out of his mind. But when he finally fell asleep, he was smiling. Miles woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Emma's voice, high and excited, coming from the kitchen. His heart stopped. Emma was supposed to sleep until at least 7:30. It was barely 7, and Vivian was... He threw on sweatpants and a t-shirt and rushed down the hallway, preparing for disaster. What he found instead was Emma sitting at the kitchen table in her pajamas, legs swinging, talking animatedly while Vivian stood at the counter making coffee. Vivian was still wearing Miles's t-shirt. It hung to mid-thigh on her, and her hair was a mess and she looked absolutely terrified and completely focused on whatever Emma was saying. And then the baking soda reacts with the vinegar and it creates carbon dioxide, which makes the foam that looks like lava, Emma was explaining. We're doing it for the science fair, and Jessica wants to add food coloring, but I think that's cheating because real lava isn't red. It's actually more like orange or yellow, depending on the temperature. Vivian saw Miles and relief flooded her face. Good morning. Emma spun around. Dad, Ms. Hale was here when I woke up, and she said you said she could stay over, and I'm telling her about my volcano project. Is that okay? Miles's brain was still catching up. Yeah, that's okay. She doesn't know how to make coffee, Emma Stage whispered. I had to show her where the mugs are. I'm apparently very bad at kitchens, Vivian said, and there was real humor in her voice despite the panic in her eyes. You're doing fine, Miles said. He moved to the table, ruffled Emma's hair. What are you doing up so early? I couldn't sleep. I was too excited about the science fair. Emma turned back to Vivian. Do you like science? I do, actually. I studied computer science in college. That's what Dad does. Well, kind of. He does data science, which is like computer science, but with more math. Emma bounced in her chair. Did you know that data can predict the future? Like, not really the future, but patterns that help you make guesses about what might happen? I did know that, Vivian said, sitting down across from Emma with her coffee mug. It's actually a big part of what I do at work. You're Dad's boss, right? I am. Is he good at his job? Vivian smiled, and it was genuine. He's excellent at his job. One of the best analysts we have. Emma beamed with pride. That's because he's really smart. He helps me with my math homework, and he never gets stuff wrong. I get stuff wrong sometimes, Miles protested, joining them at the table. Never math stuff. Emma turned back to Vivian, studying her with unnerving intensity. Dad says he likes you. Miles choked on air. Emma, it's okay. I don't mind. I just wanted to make sure you're nice to him. Emma's expression turned serious, protective. Because he's sad sometimes. He tries to hide it, but I know. And if you make him more sad, I'll be really mad. Vivian looked at Emma with something like awe. That's very fair. And for the record, I don't want to make him sad either. I actually like him too. Good, Emma nodded, satisfied. Do you want to see my volcano? It's in my room. It's not done yet, but you can see the structure. I'd love to. Emma grabbed Vivian's hand and dragged her down the hallway, talking a mile a minute about PVC pipes and paper mache techniques. Miles sat at the kitchen table alone, trying to process what had just happened. He'd been terrified of this introduction, worried about timing and pressure and Emma's reaction. Instead, his 8-year-old daughter had handled it like a seasoned diplomat, asked the hard questions, established boundaries, and welcomed Vivian into their morning like it was the most natural thing in the world. 10 minutes later, they emerged from Emma's room, Vivian looking slightly shell-shocked. She's incredible, Vivian said quietly, while Emma ran to brush her teeth. She interrogated you, didn't she? Thoroughly. Asked about my intentions, my work schedule, whether I know how to make pancakes. Vivian smiled. I failed the pancake question. I can teach you. I'd like that. Emma reappeared, backpack in hand. Dad, we're going to be late for school. Miles glanced at the clock. 7:40. They had 20 minutes. We're fine on time, kiddo. But I want to get there early to work on my volcano. Emma looked at Vivian. Are you coming back? To visit, I mean? Vivian glanced at Miles, asking permission. He nodded. I'd like to, Vivian said. If that's okay with you. It's okay with me. Just don't make my dad sad. I'll do my best. Emma hugged Miles, grabbed her lunch from the counter, and headed for the door. Bye, Miss Hale. See you later. And then she was gone, leaving Miles and Vivian standing in the kitchen in their pajamas, staring at each other. That was not how I planned for that to go, Miles said. How did you plan for it to go? I don't know. More awkward, more dramatic. She basically just accepted you into our lives like you were a new library book. Vivian laughed, shaky with relief. She's amazing and terrifying, and I think she might be smarter than both of us combined. Definitely smarter than me. They stood there for a moment, and Miles felt the weight of everything they still had to deal with. The HR disclosure, the board, Vivian's mother, the lies they'd told. But right now, in this moment, it felt manageable. I should get to the office, Vivian said. Change into actual clothes. Prepare for whatever Monday brings. About that, Miles took her hand. We need to come clean, today. Tell HR the real timeline before this gets worse. Vivian's expression flickered with fear, then resolve. You're right. It might cost you. The board might reconsider their support. I know. She squeezed his hand, but Emma asked if I was nice to you, and lying to protect my career isn't nice. It's cowardly. You're not a coward. Then I should stop acting like one. Vivian pulled him closer. Let's do it together, both of us. Tell them the truth and deal with the fallout as a team. Miles kissed her, tasting coffee and courage and the terrifying freedom of choosing honesty over safety. Okay, he said. Together. They called Jennifer Wright from Miles's apartment, both of them on speakerphone, both of them shaking. Vivian did most of the talking, her voice steady and clear as she explained the real timeline, the wedding, the arrangement, the way it had turned into something real. She took full responsibility for the backdated disclosure forms, didn't make excuses, didn't try to minimize it. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment after Vivian finished. I appreciate your honesty, she said finally, though I wish it had come sooner. I know. I'm sorry. This puts us in a difficult position. The board was assured that proper procedures were followed. Now we have to go back and tell them they weren't. I understand, and I'll accept whatever consequences the board deems appropriate. Vivian's hand found Miles's, held tight. But I want to be clear. This relationship is real. It matters, and I'm not apologizing for it, only for how I handled the disclosure. Noted. More silence. I'll need to escalate this to the board. There will likely be another meeting. And Miles, you'll need to meet with your direct supervisor to discuss any potential conflicts. I understand, Miles said. For what it's worth, Jennifer said, her tone softening slightly. I respect you both coming forward. It would have been easier to let the lie stand. Easier, Vivian agreed, but not better. They hung up, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Vivian started laughing, high and slightly hysterical. I just potentially destroyed my career for a relationship that started 3 days ago, she said. We both did. Are we insane? Completely. Miles pulled her into his arms. But I'd rather be honest and unemployed than perfect and miserable. That's easy to say now. Ask me again when the board demands my resignation. They won't. You can't know that. I can hope it. Miles tilted her chin up, made her look at him. And if they do, we'll figure it out. You're brilliant, Vivian. Any company would be lucky to have you. Even after I lied to protect myself? Even after you told the truth to make it right? Vivian kissed him hard, desperate, like she was trying to memorize the feeling before everything fell apart. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I need to go home, change, prepare for whatever comes next. Call me after? Promise. She left, and Miles stood in his empty apartment feeling like he'd just jumped off a cliff and was still waiting to see if there was water at the bottom or rocks. The call from the board came at 2:30. Miles was at his desk pretending to work when Vivian's name lit up his phone. He stepped into an empty conference room to take it. What happened? He asked. Emergency board meeting in 20 minutes. Vivian's voice was calm, but Miles could hear the fear underneath. They want answers. They want to discuss whether I can still lead effectively given my judgment in this situation. What do you need from me? Nothing. This is my mess. I'll handle it. Vivian, I'm serious, Miles. You've done enough. You told the truth. You risked your job for me. Let me do this part alone. I don't want you to be alone. I know, but I need to do this myself. I need to stand in front of that board and own my choices without hiding behind you or anyone else. She paused. I'll call you after. Good luck. Thanks. I'm going to need it. She hung up, and Miles spent the next 2 hours in agony, unable to focus, unable to think about anything except Vivian in that boardroom fighting for her career while he sat uselessly at his desk. At 4:47, his phone rang again. I still have a job, Vivian said, and she sounded exhausted and exhilarated and close to tears. Miles sagged with relief. What happened? The board was furious about the false disclosure, questioned my judgment extensively, suggested that perhaps I needed to step back, take some time, consider whether I was in the right headspace to lead. Vivian's voice hardened. And then Daniel showed up. Your brother? My brother? Apparently someone, I think it was my assistant, bless her, called him when she heard about the meeting. He showed up uninvited and told the board that if they wanted to fire someone for being human, they should start with him because he'd made far worse decisions and no one had questioned his fitness to lead his department. Vivian laughed, watery and amazed. He gave this whole speech about how perfectionism isn't leadership, how vulnerability is strength, how the best CEOs are the ones who can admit mistakes and grow from them. Did it work? It helped. Combined with my track record, the fact that I came clean voluntarily, and honestly, I think some of them were impressed by the sheer audacity of it all. Vivian took a shaky breath. I'm on probation, 6 months of increased oversight, any future policy violations, and I'm out. But I get to keep my job. Vivian, that's incredible. It's terrifying, but also liberating. I stood in front of 12 people who have the power to destroy my career, and I told them the truth about being messy and imperfect, and they didn't destroy me. Miles could hear the wonder in her voice, like she'd just discovered gravity worked differently than she'd been taught. What about us? He asked quietly. HR wants us to transfer to different departments. Eliminate any potential conflicts. They suggested I could move to a different division or you could transfer to operations. Miles felt his stomach drop. I told them no. What? I told them that we disclose the relationship properly now, that there's no direct reporting line, and that if they want to transfer one of us, they can transfer me. Vivian's voice was fierce. I'm not asking you to give up your job because I made a mistake, and I'm not letting them punish us for being honest. What did they say? That they take it under advisement, which means they'll probably monitor us both like hawks and wait for any excuse to push the issue. Vivian paused. But for now, we both keep our jobs, and we keep each other. Miles closed his eyes, felt relief and gratitude and love. Yes, love. even though it was too soon and too fast and completely terrifying, wash over him. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I'm proud of us." Vivian's voice softened. "Can I see you tonight? I know it's a school night and Emma needs sleep, but I need to see you. Come over. We're ordering pizza. You can join us." "Are you sure?" "Emma already asked if you were coming back. She wants to show you the volcano again and explain her theory about why red food coloring is scientifically inaccurate." Vivian laughed, bright and real. I would love nothing more. That night, Vivian showed up at Miles's apartment in jeans and a sweater that looked soft and worn, carrying a bag from an expensive bakery. "I brought dessert," she said when Emma answered the door. "I don't know how to make anything, but I can buy things." Emma's eyes went wide at the pastries. "Dad, can we keep her?" "Emma!" Miles felt his face heat. "What? She brought fancy cookies?" Vivian was laughing, and Miles realized he'd never heard her laugh like this. Unguarded, genuine, the sound of someone who'd stopped performing and started living. They ate pizza at the small kitchen table, Emma dominating the conversation with volcano facts and her opinions on various Disney movies, and a detailed explanation of why her friend Jessica was wrong about literally everything. Vivian listened with complete focus, asked smart questions, admitted when she didn't know things. She didn't try to impress Emma or win her over. She just showed up honestly, and Emma responded by treating her like she'd always been part of their strange little family. After dinner, Emma demonstrated her volcano, currently just a wire frame covered in paper mache, and Vivian asked questions about the chemical reactions and structural integrity with the seriousness of someone discussing a corporate merger. Miles stood in the doorway watching them, his heart so full it physically hurt. When Emma finally went to bed, after 3 glasses of water, 2 bathroom trips, an extensive negotiation about reading time, Miles and Vivian collapsed on the couch together. "She's exhausting," Vivian said, but she was smiling. "She's 8. It's her job to be exhausting." "I like her. She likes you too. She told me you were pretty cool for a grown-up." Vivian laughed. "High praise, aye." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Vivian's head on Miles's shoulder, his arm around her waist. Outside, the city hummed with evening traffic. Inside, everything felt quiet and right. "I talked to my mother today," Vivian said eventually. Miles tensed. "How did that go?" "About as well as expected. She's furious about the board situation, mortified by the society blog posts, convinced I've destroyed the family reputation." Vivian's voice was steady, matter of fact. "I told her that I was sorry she felt that way, but I wasn't sorry for my choices, that I'd rather be happy and imperfect than miserable and pristine." "What did she say?" "That I was being naive, that happiness is fleeting but reputation is forever, that I'd regret choosing a relationship over stability." Vivian lifted her head to look at Miles. "I told her I'd take my chances." Miles kissed her, soft and deep, trying to pour every ounce of gratitude and affection and, yes, love into the gesture. When they pulled apart, Vivian's eyes were shining. "I'm not good at this," she whispered. "Relationships, domesticity, any of it. I'm going to mess up constantly." "Me too. I work too much. I'll forget important dates. I'll retreat into my head when things get hard. And I'll panic about loss. I'll be overprotective of Emma. I'll struggle with letting you in completely. So we're both disasters." "Yep." Miles tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But we're honest disasters, and that's better than perfect lies." Vivian smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably around the time I agreed to fake date my CEO in a blizzard." "Best decision you ever made?" "Definitely top 5. "Only top 5? Emma's birth is number 1. Marrying Sarah is number 2. Everything else is negotiable." Vivian's expression turned serious. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you think Sarah would approve? Of me? Of us? Of you moving on?" Miles thought about his wife, brilliant, funny, fiercely loving Sarah, who'd made him promise, in those last horrible weeks, not to stop living when she was gone. He thought about the way she'd loved hard and honest, never settling for anything less than real. "She'd like you," he said quietly. "She'd probably give you a hard time about the expensive wine and the penthouse. But she'd like that you're honest, that you're trying. that you make me remember what it feels like to be more than just Emma's dad. I wish I could have met her. Me too. They sat together in the soft light of Miles's living room, surrounded by the beautiful mess of an actual life, and felt the ghost of Sarah settle around them, not haunting, but blessing, giving permission, making space. Stay, Miles said, tonight, and tomorrow night, and the night after that. Stay until we figure out how to make this work, or until we crash and burn trying. That's a terrible plan. Got a better one? Vivian shook her head, smiling. No, I really don't. So she stayed. Over the next few weeks, they built something neither of them had ever experienced, a relationship based on truth instead of performance. Vivian learned to make pancakes with Emma on Sunday mornings, usually burning the first batch, but laughing about it instead of retreating into perfectionism. Miles spent evenings at Vivian's penthouse helping her turn it into an actual home, adding throw pillows and plants and photos, replacing the showroom furniture with pieces that felt comfortable instead of impressive. The office gossip eventually died down, replaced by new scandals and drama. The board's increased oversight gradually relaxed as Vivian continued to excel at her job while also leaving at reasonable hours to have dinner with Miles and Emma. Catherine Hale continued to disapprove, but Vivian stopped seeking her approval, choosing instead to build a relationship with her mother based on boundaries and honesty rather than perfection and performance. Grant sent one final text, a simple, "I was wrong about you," and Vivian deleted it without responding, too busy living her life to worry about his opinion of it. 3 months after that first blizzard, on a warm spring evening with the windows open and Emma at a sleepover, Miles and Vivian sat on the couch in his apartment surrounded by the comfortable chaos of their merged lives. "I'm thinking about selling the penthouse," Vivian said casually. Miles looked up from the book he was reading. "Really? It's too big for one person, too cold, too perfect." She turned to face him. "I was thinking maybe I could find something else. Somewhere with room for a home office and a guest room for when Emma stays over. Somewhere that feels like an actual home. Somewhere like here." Vivian bit her lip, suddenly nervous. "Maybe somewhere exactly like here? I mean, if you wanted, if it's not too fast." Miles kissed her before she could spiral into anxiety. "Move in with us. I'm messy. I'll take over the bathroom with skincare products. I'll work late and forget to text that I'm on my way home. And I'll leave dishes in the sink. Emma will recruit you for elaborate art projects. We'll have to negotiate closet space." Sounds terrible. Sounds perfect. Vivian laughed, that bright, honest sound that Miles had fallen in love with. "Okay, let's do it. Let's be messy and imperfect and honest together." Best decision you ever made? Definitely top 5. Only top 5? Asking you to help me at the wedding is number 1. The rest is negotiable. Miles pulled her closer, feeling the solid weight of her against him, the reality of a future built on truth instead of performance. Outside, the city moved through its evening rhythms. Inside, surrounded by Emma's artwork and mismatched furniture, and the beautiful wreckage of 2 broken people choosing to build something whole, everything felt exactly right. They'd started with a transaction in a blizzard, 2 desperate people making a deal to survive one night. They'd built it into something real through honesty and courage and the willingness to be imperfect together, and Miles couldn't imagine anything more perfect than that.